Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Venkatesh Bhat sir and
Morning, sir.
Sundarajan sir, and the attendees. This is the second day of the CA to CFO program of 4 days. A hearty welcome to you all the attendees. Because the registration is done individually on different days, some are under confusion that whether it is a continuous program or not. But I again announce for the benefit of the attendees that this is a continuous program of 4 days, that is 16th, 18th, and 23rd, 24th. So I would request you to take the benefit of this one, and those I think most of you must have attended the 16th session. Today it is very important topic that those who are in practice also how to enter the field of as a CFO. That will be taken by the coordinator of this program, Sri Venkatesh Bhat sir, and I wish to introduce him before the start of the session for the today, and he will take over for first session, and there will be two more speakers for the day. We will be introducing them as and when they join. So with this, I welcome, very heartily welcome you again. Venkatesh sir, welcome, and also Sundarajan sir, welcome, and welcome again all the delegates. I take the pleasure of introducing the first speaker for the day, Venkatesh Bhat. Venkatesh Bhat is a chartered accountant by profession and has topped All India and South India respectively in CA intermediate and final examinations. He started his career with HUL in 1993 and later worked in Whirlpool and GE. He has held the chief finance officer position for more than a decade. First in ACT Fibernet and later in Blackbuck, and held board positions in group companies. He has also held the chief operating officer position in ACT Fibernet for a year. He is currently the managing partner of Astrawise LLP, headquartered at Bengaluru, which provides strategic CFO services to MSMEs and startups in early growth phase. He mentors founders while they go through incubation and business takeoff stages. He was part of the task force set up by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting to oversee phase 3 and 4 digitization in the country. He was also Executive Council member of the ISP Association of India and was a regular participant in DOT and TRI consultations. He was recognized as one of the top 100 most influential CFOs in India in 2016 by CIMA. He has attended executive education courses in Wharton University and London Business School. With this, I take the pride of introducing Venkatesh Bhat to the audience. Sir, welcome, sir. I forgot the name of the other speaker.
Mr. Deepak Gupta.
Deepak, sir, welcome on behalf of SIRC.
Good morning.
I think Govind ji is yet to join.
Maybe we can introduce him now, sir.
Shall we introduce Deepak, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sundarajan, sir, you please introduce.
Yes, sir.
Deepak.
Namaskaram, Deepak.
Namaskaram, sir.
Secretary SIRC of ICAI, Venkatesh Bhat sir, Deepak Gupta sir, the speaker to come, and the audience of this program. Namaskaram to you all. Let me take the privilege of introducing Sri Govind Mundhra.
No, Deepak sir. Deepak is there. Govind Mundhra is yet to join.
Deepak Gupta, right?
Yes, sir. Deepak Gupta.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't recognize the face.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Deepak Gupta is a finance professional with 16 plus years of experience in consulting and industry across industries and geography. He is a chartered accountant, All India rank 34 in Inter, company secretary, certified public accountant, CPA, and MBA from Indian School of Business. Well qualified, sir. CPA from US, sir.
Yes, sir. From US.
Yes, I'm doing in Australia. That's why I asked.
Okay.
Yeah. He started his career in Ernst and Young and later worked in Deloitte, ACT Fiber, Govind Technology. He worked extensively and across finance and commercial area and assisted in fundraise, M&A, treasury, and business finance functions. He is the foundation partner of is LLP, where startups in early growth stage set advisory and execution services on strategies, finance initiatives, and fundraising. He is a guest speaker in MS Ramaiah College of Management and Education on various finance topics and general management skills. He believes perseverance, persistence, continuous learning, and hard work are the pillars of success. In his free time, he loves listening to music, playing sports, any kind, and spending time with family. All the best, sir. I take this opportunity to wish you the best of luck for this program. Please continue.
Okay, sir. Happy learning. Over to you, Venkatesh. But sir, when Govind Mundhra sir joins you, please introduce him, sir.
Sure.
I'll be rejoining in another half an hour now. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Sundarajan, you will have to introduce Mr. Mundhra because I won't have his introductory note.
Yes. Please stay back, sir, for some time. Sundarajan, sir. Okay.
Yeah, good morning to all. Yes. Can I start now?
Yes, sir.
So, good morning to all. This is today's session is I would say is a central part of the 4-day course. Since many CAs over the last 18 to 24 months discussed with me how exactly they can move from a practicing chartered accountant providing traditional services to virtual CFO services being provided. So on this I have had multiple discussions with people. I've taken sessions in Bangalore chapter and even one-to-one sessions I have held. So what I'm presenting today is a summary of various thought process that I've had in this regard. Some of this may sound a bit surprising to you. I'm okay for any of you to later on to engage with me in terms of discussion. How exactly this is how exactly to go about this entire journey from CA to CFO. I would suggest that if there are any questions in the process that when I'm talking about, you are welcome to make your notes and you can actually put up the questions. Okay, the topic today is a paradigm shift, the journey from CA to CFO. So how does a practicing CA become a trusted virtual CFO for a businessman? That's the journey. Why we call it journey? I mean, today many services that CA is providing are new. They are not really. They were not even prevalent. Let us say a couple of decades earlier, or even 1 decade earlier. So many new opportunities are coming in. So the practicing CAs are picking up these additional certifications or additional tasks, and then they're excelling there. So why it has to be a journey from CA to CFO? Why don't an existing chartered accountant straight away start a virtual CFO services? Okay, there are certain institute-driven rules regarding the whether a practicing CA holding a certificate of practice can do a virtual CFO services. I'm not getting into that. Virtual CFO at the end of the day is a separate profession, and you may need to be active in different forums in order to for the larger businessmen community to know you. And unlike a chartered accountants services which are mandatory for different sized companies, virtual CFO is not a mandatory service, and hence there is a need for your presence to be known to a larger group of business community before you start seeing walk-ins into your services. So from that perspective, practicing certificate chartered accountant may have a certain amount of disadvantage because he cannot advertise. He cannot be promote his business as per the ethics prevalent for our profession, and hence from that perspective, it may be needed that you need to drop a certificate of practice and join a virtual CFO services, or you have a many chartered accountants, what they do is their existing chartered accountancy has already reached a certain level of maturity. There are other partners who are younger and who are able to take this further, and hence they move out of the certificate of practice and move into virtual CFO services. That's one path several virtual CFO CSR are taking. Now this is I would say is a personal choice as to how do you want to actually conduct. Some of the services that come under virtual CFO can also be handled directly by by a CA holding certificate of practice. Let me also make that clear. And hence if you are anyway not going to advertise and your services are primarily the ones which are anyway rendered as a allowed by the institute as a chartered accountant, it is possible to continue to hold a certificate of practice and do a limited part of the virtual CFO. That's one choice that is available. Having said, because this was one specific question, a couple of participants in the last meeting actually asked me, and hence I am covering that. So moving on, I have used a very interesting phrase here, paradigm shift. Okay, so I will be covering what is this paradigm shift as part of the discussion. The overall discussion today is broken into three parts. Typically, from a traditional practitioner to a virtual CFO, how do you really move? Is the large part of the presentation. I'm also briefly covering a chartered accountant who is working today, who is not holding a certificate of practice, and so who is doing the lower level of finance organization work in a company. How does he then aspire to become a CFO? Is that an automatic path? No. There are why many of the CFOs today have started their career as early finance managers or assistant managers in organizations. It is not that all those who have started as assistant managers or managers have become CFOs, and hence there is a path to be taken. There are specific steps that need to be undertaken by the aspirant to the CFO position before the person he or she reaches there. And many times it is also about choice of the path that one makes. Someone may decide at some point of time that this is not meant for me. I am cut out for something else, and they may move on. So those choice of career paths happen continuously for us throughout our professional journey. However, someone who has decided on that, how does he reach a CFO position is the essence of the part 2 of the discussion. And I'm very specifically covering the role of CFO in a startup environment or a very early stage company. Sometimes startup is also used in a very restrictive sense, in the sense of a tech company, something that is going to really scale up and all that. So I would want to call out here, when I'm saying startup, I'm talking about any company that is just now starting. It's not necessarily only a startup of a let us say Bengaluru HSR layout, Indira Nagar kind of a startup. It is any startup, and in these startups, how does the role of a CFO is different compared to a set company? That's what we will cover in the part 3. So the first part I'm starting off now on traditional practice to virtual CFO. Okay, why is this so much of interest in the virtual CFO? As some of you know, Institute has taken a lot of interest in this virtual CFO services as an additional service, and in fact, Western India Regional Council has already brought out a white paper on how do chartered accountants can think of actually starting off this virtual CFO service, how do they go about it? What kind of skill sets needed? There is a detailed white paper that has been created. I would say this is pre-pandemic. So in a post-COVID scenario, some of those notes that are there in that white paper may need to be modified, and hence there is an opportunity for Southern India Region Council to also to look at an updated white paper considering the current work from home and kind of digitization changes that have happened in the last 1.5 years. Some changes can be brought out, and we can actually bring in a much better, more updated white paper around this topic. But coming down to why there is so much of interest in virtual CFO services, obviously Institute is trying to create lot of opportunities for chartered accountants, and rightfully so. On the one hand, it is the fact that the traditional chartered accountants services called around accounting or taxation are getting largely automated, and even if they exist, the amount of financial opportunity in terms of providing these services and actually being able to sustain a larger team is coming down by the day. A lot of these activities are getting automated, and hence what is left out is only a smaller part of the accounting in a well-set organization. In a smaller organization, while they may be able to, they may need these services, the amount of money or the amount of fees that they can afford is also limited. Given all this, there is a need for chartered accountants to look beyond the traditional services. And the economy is also opening up and giving many of these opportunities. So Chartered Accountants Institute is actually trying its level best to create these opportunities by identifying those opportunities and talking to the relevant government bodies and authorities, and creating those opportunities for the chartered accountants, and at the same time are creating many programs by which chartered accountants become aware of them. One of them is VCFO services.
Screen sharing, is it started? No, it seems it's not yet started.
Yes.
Screen sharing is not yet started, sir. Are you sharing a screen, or else you're just giving a prelude?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's visible. Now it's visible, please. Thank you.
Okay. I thank you for noting that. I didn't realize that it was not getting shared.
Please, sir. It's visible. You can continue, so please.
Yeah. So when you look at the multiple factors, I would start with the prevalent startup culture in some of the metros of the country. This startup culture has created opportunity of virtual CFO services being needed. Why? Because compared to a typical smaller company, which is not a startup, in the sense it is not part of that tech-enabled businesses, in this startup companies, the need for a variety of finance services is felt at an early stage itself. In a smaller company, let us say not a startup, and is not really getting funded, the way you go about building a product, building a service, building a team is at a different pace. Hence, most of these entrepreneurs will need early stage a very simple accounting and taxation services, not necessarily very highly complicated. Secondly, their business models are different, and hence there will be many regulatory and other challenges coming in, which renders the traditional way of accounting, looking at MIS, running the company a challenge, because there is no set pattern by which actually the old rules around accounting can be directly applied to the new situation. It will require an experienced chartered accountant or a finance professional to understand the business model, identify the right kind of accounting processes to be done. Mind you, I am not saying the accounting is different. I am only saying the accounting process involved could be a lot different. Many times the transactions are very small. Transactions are done on a digital basis, and there are a lot of reconciliations coming in, which adds the complexity of the accounting process. Plus, these companies also startup companies get into fundraise at a very early stage. They make losses, so their fundraising becomes a very imminent requirement as they start scaling their businesses. And many times their fund requirements are a lot more complex compared to a traditional company. Given the kind of challenges that are there in a startup culture, they require very good or a very experienced finance professional to support them. My experience, when I have seen so many startup companies in my last 10-15 years of working in this part of the industry, is that at least 85 to 90% of the startups do not even have a any kind of finance experienced person as part of the founding team. They may have a tech guy, they may have someone who is experienced in operations. Many times they have someone who is a lot more understanding of that particular industry. For example, someone is in healthcare, there will be someone who is experienced in healthcare. There will be someone who is operationally good to run the company. There will be someone who is going to be technologically sound, but then there is no one who has a finance background. So this opportunity, hence the startup culture at that early stage itself, instead of relying on a small CA who can only do an accounting or a taxation, they require a chartered accountant or a finance professional who can do a wide variety of more complex services. That's the need arising out of startup culture. The second, this has been a topic which is very close to the institute: revival and growth of SMEs. In this country, MSMEs account for a very large number of large part of the economy. The numbers have been quoted multiple times. This part of the MSMEs also provide opportunity of employment to 11 or 12 million or 1.1 or 1.2 crore Indians. So from an employment or an export orientation or GDP, all these MSMEs are really large, and today all these MSMEs are going through a difficult phase of their business journey. COVID itself has been a big challenge. Even before COVID, the availability of funds and availability of the facilities which are available, whether they are reaching MSMEs, have been a matter of concern for everybody. Today, with the so much of changes happening in the environment, whether it is on the digitized processes, or whether it is the change of pace in their own industry, the way their competition is scaling up, the way the products in their industry are undergoing changes. It's a much faster product cycle that every industry is facing today. Given all these, MSMEs are really struggling just to keep their head above water level, which in a way is a large opportunity for chartered accountants, because this is an area where chartered accountants need to focus and help these MSMEs to run their businesses in a much more professional manner, give them the necessary assistance to actually to access the right funds, right processes, look at the way of their running their companies, get them the right compliance processes, and in general help them to run their businesses a lot more professionally. Third factor that has actually been helping the virtual CFO services is that today virtual location has become a reality, which means you don't need to be present in a city to provide services of virtual CFO service in the city. My firm is sitting in Bangalore. We are providing services, virtual CFO services to a company which is primary, its operations only in Odisha. They are based in Bhubaneswar. Then another company which is in Delhi. We have not even gone and met them. We are mentors and strategic CFO services to a company which is based at Rajahmundry. So how has this become possible? It is because today, from the business side, from the businessman side also, there is a lot more realization that it doesn't have to be that every meeting is face to face for them to actually get the benefits of a service. So the need to be present in a particular city, be present in a client location has gone away. Secondly, from a CS perspective, I know so many CS in Bangalore today who are running virtual offices operating out of not only Bangalore, even in the smaller cities, which means they are able to get better quality of team members, say Hassan or let's say Namakkal or Hosur, and are able to work with them, still render the services to someone who is sitting in Vijayawada. Now, what this has created is a great opportunity where services can be rendered using the team, optimizing its resources, and hence from a startup or an MSME perspective, you are able to provide these services at a lower cost and you are able to utilize a large pool of talent which may not be sitting only in metro. So there's a huge enablement that has happened because of COVID. Fourth one is the increased sophistication. Any business transaction today is not a simple purchase sale kind of a transaction. There are many complexities involved, and as you today, even a small thing like let's say barber shop, you want to actually to take the your barber shop to the next level on a later note. Maybe the best thing is to actually to start an app and have a website. Suddenly your business has become a lot more digital and a lot more sophisticated, and with that you are able to attract customers. What does this mean? If you don't bring in sophistication in the way you are rendering service, if you are not looking at different customer segments and trying to reach them, talk the language, not the Tamil Kannada language, talk the language in the sense that what they understand, their age group understands, and is able to attract them to your website or your business, you don't have a business, because all your existing customers will go away. What will be left could be only those customers who have done the business in the old fashion, in the old way. Only they are left with you, but they may not be large enough for you to sustain your business, and they may not even be paying more for you to sustain your business. And hence, sophistication needs to be built into every business. Whether you are an MSME, whether you are a startup, or whether you are even an established medium scale company. And the last one is every business process become digitized. The simple act of collecting money has become digitized. So it is not simply that okay, I take cash or I take check. There are any number of ways, starting with the payment gateways, starting with the net banking, as well as receiving the physical checks, as well as cash. And there are advanced wallet-based way of running businesses, which means money will be topped into a wallet, which is a digital wallet, and from the digital wallet you are able to take money for your services, which will require a lot more sophisticated processes. And I'm talking about a very simple collection process. Think of the way the service itself is getting rendered, or a product itself is being manufactured. Everything is becoming digitized. Even the product development is digitized. And here, this digitization is also a huge factor for virtual CFO services becoming more and more prominent and needed service in the MSME and the startups. Now, I use the word paradigm shift. What is paradigm shift? Just look at the 3 photos at the bottom. Okay, let's look at the one in the first photo. What is this photo? And the first glance, it looks like a face, and something is being held in the middle of in the front of the face. Okay, if you look at it very carefully, that looks like a lamp. So one way of saying is that this is the one face and a lamp in front of the face. The other way of looking at it is that actually the lamp itself is in the middle of a mirror, and there are 2 faces that are looking at each other, or one face's mirror image is on the other side. So the way you look at this photo can be different, and you can actually come to a different conclusion. So when I said it's a lamp and a face, you were looking at it in a particular fashion. The minute I said that it's may not be a lamp, but it could be a center mirror, you change your way of looking at things. Paradigm shift is primarily this. Look at the second picture. You can say this is, in a way, it's a rabbit with its ears, behind its face, behind its head actually, or you may say that it is a bird with its beak in the front. And both of them, if you once the explanation is given, when you look at it, it is both seem to be possible. But if the second explanation is not given based on only on the first explanation, you will not be able to see the other side. Look at the third one. What is this? Is it a face, or is it someone who is blowing a trumpet? Now both could be true. It depends on which has been told to you first. And when the second explanation is given, your mind goes into the second way of looking at it. Paradigm shift is essentially this. You change your way of thinking, but in a very fundamental and irreversible way, to a different style, which will lead to a different set of behaviors and perception. Your perception changes, your behavior changes, your way of talking to a customer, your way of delivering the service changes. That is paradigm shift. Paradigm is a way of looking at things, and shift is to change this way for a specific purpose. Now, why this paradigm shift has come into CA to CFO service? That would be the question in many of our minds. The reason is that the lens and view are different if you are in traditional practice, and the lens and view are going to be completely different if you are a virtual CFO. It is important to understand this slide very carefully, because many times the chartered accountant make the mistake that I will continue to do what I do. In addition, I will start rendering additional services. Ideally, that may not be the most ideal way of actually delivering things. So in a traditional practice, what happens? You are most of the time giving a view outside in. The business is happening somewhere, you are sitting outside, and when the businessman comes and asks you a question, you are answering. That is called outside in view. So your most of the time view is business is different, I am somewhere sitting outside. In a virtual CFO, your fundamental lens changes. You are part of the business, and you are looking at what is going to happen to the business in future, or what is happening to the business from an external regulatory or competition or other partners of the company, and giving them advice to the business. In traditional practice, you are mostly depending on historical and interval data. What is historical? Historical is you always look at, in the month of March, you are looking at December data. If you are a more modern guy, possibly in the month of March, you may end up seeing February data by 7th of March. And many times you see interval data. What do you mean by interval data? You look at data for 3 months, 6 months in one go. You take a statutory audit for 2021. In the month of May 21, you are getting data from April 20 to March 21. Historical is the interval data, historical data. That doesn't help you to actually to run the business. As a virtual CFO, your ability to manage a stream of regular things as they happen, that data. And many times it is financial and non-financial. For example, as a virtual CFO, you may need to understand how exactly the customer lead is actually taking place, based on which you should be able to say, okay, whether the business plan that I put for next 1 quarter is going to happen or not. That's the requirement from a virtual CFO, not necessarily from a traditional practitioner. In traditional practice, it is about mostly information. You look at information, you compile information, you give information. Virtual CFO is more about insights. You have to give insights into the business. Your service is valued because you are able to look at large set of data and give insights to the business team. Traditional practice, what is valued is subject matter expertise. So you are respected because when a tax issue is presented to you, you are able to give an appropriate answer, or you are able to talk to a couple of people and then give an appropriate answer. But most of the time you know the issue in a certain level of detail. So you are respected because you are a subject matter expert. In a virtual CFO, you are respected because you are more generalist. What is generalist? Generalist means you understand HR, you understand the business, you understand strategy, you understand even the product of that particular business. Suppose somebody is in precision components for an automobile industry. As a virtual CFO, you need to know the details of these products and should be able to articulate. You should be able to think through the implications of this product, what exactly is happening in its customer industries, what's happening on the technological trends. At least you should be reasonably well versed. You may not be the topmost guy there, but you need to be aware. The awareness of the various things that are impacting the company is the strength of the virtual CFO. In fact, the other day, MPV sir was talking about the opportunity. What he said is that the approach, the CFO is the most knowledgeable person about the business in the company, is the real test of a good CFO. It even applies to a virtual CFO. Focus is more on audit risk in a traditional practice. In a virtual CFO, these are more about business risk. I am not getting into it because I covered it in the last presentation. Hence, I am not touching on that. But audit risk, as we know, is a completely different set of risks, where the auditor is more ascertaining whether his audit processes are adequate to understand and find out the risks on the statement, possibility of misstatements in the financial statements. While Business risk is about whether the business will perform well or not. It's a completely different set of risks. In traditional practitioner, what is important is, are you able to ask, are you able to answer technical questions? Is the strength. Who is the best chartered accountant? If you look at 10, 15 years back, who is the best chartered accountant? It doesn't require income tax act, bare act. He knows more or less the entire act by heart. He knows which notification is relevant in a particular case. He knows how exactly a particular case law is applicable and can actually be used in a particular situation. So it was a lot more about answering technical questions. What you see, the importance comes from his ability to ask the right question. He does not need to know the answer. If he knows what questions to ask and he knows which question to ask to which person, he is serving his purpose. He doesn't need to know all the answers. What is important is an awareness and not necessarily your ability to answer all the questions about the business in its lowest level of detail. That's not really required. So when you understand, now you understand what is meant by the paradigm shift. If you are in this traditional practice, if you don't shift to the way of virtual CFO, the way it has been laid out here, you will be struggling as to while I am trying my best, why is the client not able to understand what I'm doing? Why is the client not able to appreciate? I'm putting so many hours, so many work into it, but the client is not able to see value because client's expectations are different. Client is expecting right side of this list while you are actually operating from the left side of this list. What are then the client's expectations? See, when it comes to an accounting or taxation compliance, typical expectations are around bookkeeping, tax compliance, tax advisory, statutory audit certification. These are the typical expectations. In a virtual CFO operation, while somebody may say that we provide virtually bookkeeping and taxation and tax advisory, and that is our virtual CFO services. Maybe that's a very limited way of understanding the virtual CFO services. In reality, in order to really make it worthwhile, if the client has to pay a higher fee than accounting and taxation, he would want to see these factors: driving operational processes. Are you able to drive them? Are you able to understand collections? Are you able to push the team by asking them the right questions and giving them the right information? Cost optimization. To what extent do you understand the cost to optimize? Cost optimization, not actually saying that, okay, this vendor's fees I will cut by 20%. It is understanding what is the need of a particular cost getting incurred in the context of the business and asking and hence in identifying what is the way to actually to optimize it. Handling MIS and book closures. Book closure is different compared to somebody closes the book and I am getting a trial balance and I writing the MIS. Book closure is a process by itself because you need to be fully involved into the business in order to do a book closure properly. And then various tools that need to be implemented. So many, today, even basic accounting, starting from invoice raising, invoice accounting, debit note raising, collections, collections tracking, reconciliations, even bank, everything is today digitized, and hence multiple tools need to be implemented. That's the expectation from virtual CFO. There's also another next higher level of this one, which may not necessarily be every chartered accountant's cup of tea, which is finance strategy advice. What exactly should be the strategy itself in terms of in the debt equity mix? What needs to be done? How exactly is the plan for the next 4-5 years? And then based on that, what is the right thing to do? What actually is happening on the competition and from the investor side? Understanding that and advising them. Business planning. Then detailed FP&A. When we say financial planning and analysis, what it means is that in the company there are multiple verticals or business verticals, business lines. For each of those business lines, to what extent we are able to understand what is making money, what is not making money, what needs to be defocused, deprioritized, what needs to be focused on, where exactly business plans numbers are getting met, opportunities where do they exist, that all come out of the FP&A. And then helping on the fundraise and digitally transforming the entire business. It is much larger than a tool implementation, where thinking through the entire business process completely differently, and it is not simply automating an existing process. You are identifying a completely new process through which the business can be run. So many of the old processes simply go away. That's where the digital transformation comes in. So once we understand the client expectation out of these services, you can see that it may be an easier one to accounting and taxation compared to come to virtual CFO. You need to do virtual CFO for some time, and then possibly you may go to management consulting. But if it's just such a straightforward one, again, somebody who has never seen the inside of a large company, will he be able to do these services? That is a question many people have asked. The answer to that is, it's not so simple if you have not been part of a company to understand how exactly insiders in a company think. And without understanding their thinking, it will not be possible for you to provide a virtual CFO service, or definitely not management consulting. And hence, it is important that when you get into this, you have the right kind of either somebody mentors you, or you have a right partner who comes with the corporate experience. And corporate experience not necessarily at a lower level. You need someone who has had that management experience, who has been sitting in the board meetings, or who has been sitting in the highest level of management teams in operations reviews and financial reviews, and we have been able to answer investor questions. Those are the kind of people that need to be partnered with. I will cover in terms of what all needs to be done in the subsequent slides. See, today, one of the confusion around virtual CFO is that almost anything and everything from accounting, taxation to the strategy part, everything is covered under virtual CFO. You look at this chart. You have on the x-axis you have involvement. It could be a peripheral involvement from the accounting firm into the business. Peripheral means it's not a very deep involvement. You are on the sides. Maybe once in a while you meet the business, but you are not part of the business meetings actually. Okay, and a deep involvement is where a lot of the business data flows to you, and you are looking at it. You are advising the business. On the y-axis you have one-time involvement or a regular involvement. Where it's engagement is one time and you are doing a very peripheral work. A lot of these accounting firms, labor consultants, including sometimes even let us say CS firms, get into company formation, registrations, and those compliance kind of activities. One-time compliance. That is the lowest green box that you see here. Let us say it is peripheral, but regular work is where accounting, income tax, labor compliance, MIS happen. Many companies when chartered accountants move from their traditional practice into virtual CFO, this is where they get in. They are saying beyond accounting and income tax, and I will also do labor compliance for you. I will also prepare your MIS. You give me that. If I will not only close your accounting, I will prepare the trial balance. I will also prepare MIS and then bring to you. So typically, this is the accounting firm, labor consultants. All of them come under the peripheral involvement. In a deeper involvement, you have where it's a one-time involvement, which is a fee-based fundraise, due diligence, CRP implementation. This requires a deep expertise in each of these areas, and hence it requires focus. You require those subject matter experts to be part of the team. This is typically investment bankers, financial consultants, IT implementers are involved here. The topmost box, where let us say the strategic CFO services are getting rendered, this is where the business and finance strategy has to be articulated and agreed with the business, and then continuously looked at. Business processes need to be understood, and business processes they are actually improved upon. They are continuously fine-tuned to deliver the company business expectations. What are they? Acquiring customers, improving revenue, making higher gross margins and contribution margins, improving EBITDA, optimizing debt cost, attracting capital, both debt and equity into the company. All of this will come under the business finance process improvement. Then revenue profit optimization, which we talked about. And then the last one is finance team that a CFO, an MSME or a startup can attract will be at a lower level of experience. They may be good boys or girls, but then they may not have the right experience. And in a startup, as I explained, while the startup may be small, they may not be able to afford a lot of expenditure to be incurred on the finance. The requirements in many cases is that of a really experienced finance professional. How do we really then build it? This is where that top box comes into picture. These kind of firms will help the company to actually bring in young professionals who are good, ambitious, intelligent professionals, and then mentor them to actually hold the higher responsibilities in a very short period of time. So that way, if you see, virtual CFO covers a very large canvas. Question is, then when you are looking at it, can you do all of this? That will be the typical question many chartered accountants ask. What is the right answer? Is it doing everything, or is it picking up what is right for you or your team and then taking it forward? That's the question that we are trying to answer in the next slide. In my view, these opportunities are very similar to opportunities that are opening up in different areas. You see in the market, whether it is in a CA or whether it is a professional service or even other technical services, you have few firms who are really good and who are at the top echelon of that particular profession. These are the ones who are highly focused. They don't try to do everything, but what they do really, really well. And then you have at the bottom many companies who are not even exploring those higher opportunities. They are comfortable doing very basic level of services and saying we are happy. We don't have ambition. We don't want to do anything more. It's not giving us a lot of money, but it is okay. Our costs are controlled. We are at this level. We are working. In between, you have many firms which are trying to go up. They're trying to do everything, but they are not able to achieve all of them because each of them require different skill sets. So where is then the sweet spot lies? It is in, you have to understand as a professional, while you are a chartered accountant, so all of us are chartered accountants, each of us are different. We are really good at something and we may be okay in some areas, and in some other areas we may be really having a lot of deficiencies. The understanding self is the most important part here in order to really understand out of all these virtual CFO services, what are the ones that you should be doing. Understand, in terms of the client, wherever market you want to operate, what are the client's requirements? So you may say that I will give this, I will give this, I will give finance strategy. They may not need finance strategy. They may not need fundraise at this point of time. They may say that I want to optimize my cost. I think I am incurring losses because I don't have the right costing system, or my budgeting process needs to be improved. So understanding the key concern of the client is important before offering him a wide variety of services. And then choose the right assignments, which is a mix of what is the concern for the client, plus at the same time what is your strength. Where your strength is meeting client's concern is the most logical fit in terms of what you should do. What actually helps in the process is the network partners. So there will be some areas where you are aware, but neither you have the time nor you have the really very depth of the expertise. This is where you actually get network partners. These are the professional firms with which you work, and it's not that they're going to be part of your organization per se. It is a more of a in a way a social network. In the sense, in your client, and when you need their services, you actually bring them to the client and for a discussion, and then maybe client may directly involve with them. Or you may even have a scenario where the network partners' costs are built into your cost, you are billing to the client. But most important is that you and network partner together deliver a combined service, rather than you delivering one service and the client network partner doing something else. So this is just to specialization is nothing new to India. You look at our gods, you have specialization. You go to Lord Ganapati for removing all obstacles from your path. You go to Goddess Lakshmi for money. So hence this is built into the India's ethos that you specialize. Only when you are a specialist, people come and bhaktas come to you. Similarly, when you specialize, I would say, I want to on a humorous note end this slide. When you specialize, right kind of bhaktas come to you, right kind of clients come to you. Very important skill set that has to be built in is your ability to build and manage teams. What happens, you saw that in terms of the lengths that are needed are different. Now, if you are an existing traditional practice, most probably your team is also designed and built that way. So those people may have few years of experience, may even have more years of experience, but those years of experience become irrelevant because they need a different kind of skill sets. So focus on core competence. We discussed what is the core competence that you want to build, where you think you have the best ability to deliver results. You are picking that, saying that this is what I want to do. Identify all the skill sets needed to deliver this core competence or deliver the service to the client. Work with subject matter experts and really add complementary services around the core competence. For example, you may be really a good, let us say, due diligence expert, but you may not be having investment banking expertise. Then you have a subject matter expert of who will be doing the investment banking part of it, while you provide the due diligence services. So working with the subject matter experts, being able to go back to them is most important. Or you may be doing a great virtual CFO service, but you don't have taxation expertise. So you work with the taxation expertise, then you need to build that network ahead of the time. You can't say that today morning a client has said I'll go and look for an indirect tax expert. It's not, maybe you may be knowing many of them, but if you're not really invested your time to really build that network and understanding the expertise, their specializations, their expertise, you will not be able to deliver the services very well. draw relevant resources. You should be able to take from these experts the right resources, right people needed for a particular assignment. Ability to build this kind of virtual distributed team across is the most, in my mind, your success critical success factor is your ability to build this kind of a virtual distributed team that can actually deliver a certain part of the virtual CFO services where you think you are going to have an edge over others. Ability to control the outcome of such partnerships. One thing to get into the partnership, but you should also be able to ensure that you are able to give a client the absolutely right results. If the partner is going to work in their own fashion and it's not a coordinated effort, doesn't really help. How do you achieve this? Build social and professional networks, leverage key contacts, forge partnerships and relationships over a period of time. Combine the force of internal resource and network partnerships is the I would say golden formula. You have to build your internal resources, which basically sometimes may mean that your existing traditional practice team is actually handed over to someone else who will do the traditional practice. You build a very dedicated team that can actually work on this, or you pick up only specific people out of the existing traditional practice who you think are the right fit for the virtual CFO, and with that start off these services. And then special skills needed. We talked about so many skills that are needed. All of them need to be, you have to get into digital learning. You need to get into. Many times I would suggest that the virtual CFO services or any of these advanced services works very well when you are actually done the provider mentoring. As a for this last 70-75 years, we have always been mentored in the right way of traditional practice by getting into artificial. But today, a lot of services are beyond the traditional way of working. There is an industrial training, but the industrial training also is more about large sectors. Who are the ones who can give? These are the ones very well established setups actually. So it's not necessary that everybody then has even an opportunity to get mentored in a firm or with someone who has the right kind of expertise by which they can actually guide and really help the CA to think where exactly to build their expertise. So this is a very important action that you have to really think about. What are the challenges? It is not easy. This difficulty in attracting talent. All of us are aware of this. And in virtual CFO, it is even more difficult to build because there is not even a ready talent that is available. Like this service is new, so the talent is also not available in the market. Developing a common vision with the network partners, not easy. Forget network partners. With partners also, it's not so easy. If you are 2, 3, 4 partners, so all of us know how difficult it is to run partnership firms where everybody thinks the same way over a period of time. Today, everybody may think, 2 years, 3 years down the line, people may not think the same way. So, how do you develop the common vision? Training staff to think differently. You may have that all this, understanding, expertise. How do you make your staff go beyond, delivering month-end results to thinking differently for a virtual CFO services? And building a financially viable delivery model. In all this, the client will always want services to be at the lowest possible cost. Eventually, many times I have had this conversation with the clients. Clients want very advanced services, but their budgets they have in mind is slightly more than what they would pay to an accounting or a taxation service. Now, how do you really build a delivery module which is financially viable for you and viable for the client is a big challenge in the virtual service. The cricket gear in baseball game. Now, can you play baseball wearing cricket gear? No, you can't. If the same team under you is going to provide multiple services, virtual CFO, accounting, taxation, in their mind, client is an external party. They are focused on technical details. They are more interested in understanding the accounting, taxation issues and really develop the expertise because they have been trained to be subject matter experts. Multiple clients per employee. You are going to have many employees, handling 10, 15 clients. The approach will be almost also a project. It means, next 15 days, I will take the books, I will complete the financials, I will prepare MIS and send it back. For next 3 days, 4 days, I will complete the GST return. That's the project approach the team will have. An entire team needs to adopt a paradigm shift in its approach. Like what I have talked about paradigm shift for you, even the entire team needs to move. Where do they need to do? Now here, in a virtual CFO, this one, since a partner acts as a guide, the team needs to actually support that guidance. Partner may give guidance, but the team needs to execute it. Team focuses entirely on virtual CFO services, adopts a client in its internal output. It is a continuous engagement in a virtual CFO service, and you can only have very few clients per employee. And you have to participate in key meetings. How do you really build the team that can actually do virtual CFO services team? Is the question that I am leaving with you. So what I would want to do is, with the next 2 slides, I want to come to a conclusion and take questions, because taking up the other part is not, we will not be able to meet the timelines. What's important when you do all this is the development of a digital skill sets. So there are rapid changes in technology, shift in the manner of doing business itself happening. What does this mean? It means, it's not simply virtual CFO service. I will do 1, 2, 3, 4 things. You need to understand all the necessary tools, digitized way of working of the needed in a particular client today as well as tomorrow, in order to do that, do this virtual CFO service as well. Which means you need to be digitally advanced, and you can't be thinking in the same old way of 10, 15 years back, where we had a black box thinking as a audit of systems. It's no longer black box thinking works here. You need to know how to manage a large amount of data, and processes need to be continuously modernized. Modernization is not even a choice, actually. You need to figure out how the modernization leads to profitability. That definitely is a requirement. But then it is, in today's scenario, you don't modernize, your existing business goes away. So it is not simply a profitability improvement. It is many times revenue retention, customer retention becomes a requirement in terms of process modernization. So I'm coming to the last part of management consulting. If you are getting into management consulting, it's one level above virtual CFO, then the considerations are somewhat different. You should be having deeper industry insights and expertise. You can't be doing management consulting today for healthcare, tomorrow for pharma, third day for NGO. It cannot work that way. System thinking capabilities. You should be able to think of the larger players in that particular industry, and is able to help the client to look at the larger picture. And these are management consulting niche service, so you have to build it gradually. You can't say I will start tomorrow, and in next 1 year I need to make X amount of profitability. It does not build that way, because management consulting gets built. Your own expertise gets built over a period of time. Limited number of clients per member in deep expertise area. That's what happens in management consulting, and you may not be able to consult for competing firms, because you are such a key part of the business. You know so many business secrets. You cannot compete. You cannot give service to both Ola and Uber. They're competing firms. So the number of clients you can take also further comes down. So what I want to do is stop here, because it's almost 11 o'clock. Take for next 4-5 minutes any questions that are there, and then hand over to the next speaker. Hello.
So can we take some questions? We have 3 to 4 questions.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
I'll just take the screen sharing next one. Okay. Yes, my screen is. My Excel sheet is visible.
1 second.
You minimize the PPT so that it should be visible.
Yeah. 1 second. Yes, now it's safe. Yeah. Any difference between virtual CFO and shared CFO service? I think I covered it in one of the slides. There's actually none of these are actually clearly defined. So, however, shared CFO typically is where, let's say, you're taking 4 or 5 companies, and you become the shared CFO there. Typically, most of the time, this is about only one person, the CA, actually providing the services. Shared CFO services. In a virtual CFO services, you may be providing a stack of services, including your own team members, but you are delivering it more virtually. So you are using more of a digital way of delivery, but you are delivering a stack of services. Sometimes even including accounting, taxation, and going up to the business strategy. The second question: can you also cover how to market and bring client in? That one may not have developed much contact, being next stuck in the CFO functions area. Okay. So any professional service at the end of the day is there is only so much of marketing you can do. It is more of developing an awareness about your services. You need to develop an awareness. So you have to develop the potential client. You should be able to connect, and then you should be able to explain what you do. The real skill set here is identifying what is your core strength, and being marketing or talking about that core strength. That is what is going to give to your clients a conviction that they can actually come to you. So I would want to split this into 2 pieces. One is create awareness about your services, and second part is how do you convince a client once you have actually gone in front of a in a client. Both are different and both need to be thought through, like any of the businesses will do about their own services. You need to be digitally present. You need to be present offline. You need to be present maybe in the local professional bodies and be part of the problem solving. Solve the real business problem. Possibly you will get a lot more business. Can VCFO services be provided by a CFO who has full-time COP? I have answered this question actually. Ideally, you should surrender the COP, but some part of the virtual CFO services can be provided along with the COP. My views I have explained. I am saying you can't be providing traditional CFO services and providing virtual CFO services. You can only do one of them. You can't play cricket, baseball wearing cricket game. That's the analogy I have given. What is the quantum of the market that you envisage in this coming years, both in India and globally? I don't have any number. In my view, this market is going to get, I would say, it is going to be realized only over a period of time, because many times the businesses don't understand the need for this. It is like, in India, every third person could be a diabetic, but how many people actually know that they are diabetic? They don't know. It's the same challenge that comes here. Almost every startup, every MSME requires your services. But how do you really build? The institute is doing its bit. The government is doing its bit. But if the businessmen only think of virtual CFO services as a cost and not really as an investment and a way of changing their business, it is not going to happen. So it's over a period of time only it will happen. Opportunities are large. There are few firms are only able to do this service very well. So if you do it the right way, there is a huge opportunity. I think with that, I think I've answered the questions. Any more questions? You can always raise, send it to my email ID, which I shared last time. Yes. You can send it to Venkatesh@astrawise.com, and my mobile number is 9620201865.
Sure, sir. So next, so Sundaran sir, we can go ahead with next sessions. No, unmute yourself, sir. Unmute.
So good morning, Mr. Govind Mundhra.
Good morning, sir.
Namaskaram, Govind Mundhra, sir. Namaskaram. Thank you, Venkatesh, sir. I think you have been continuously carrying on this program so well, and it has been neatly presented. And when you said about this paradigm shift, I thought of telling a small story which I read from books. Two kids were playing so mischievously, hurting the fellow passengers in a train, in a bogie, and the fellow passengers got wild, and so they wanted to complain to the parent of the rather grandparent of the child, and when they approached him, he simply said one thing, because the kids were mischievously behaving, and they are hurting others. Everything has happened, so they were very, very, very angry, ferocious on the kid, and they want to give punishment to the kids. But when the grandparent said that these two kids have just lost their parents, their entire approach changed. And everybody started persuading the kid, and they started supporting it. I think that is the way I think you have presented this paper, and I think Mr. Govind Mundhra is also going to have the heading like that. He has given it in his profile. Yeah, that should be the way. Paradigm shift should be there for our members and for the professionals, so that it will be easy at this scenario, because definitely virtual CFO is going to be the future, because with the technology and coming up to the great level, we'll be able to present it in that way. Thank you, sir. So, and now I'll present Mr. Govind Mundhra. I'll introduce Mr. Govind Mundhra. Govind Mundhra, a seasoned finance leader and chartered accountant, has 18 years of finance and business strategy experience across global technology companies and unicorn startups. He is currently founding partner of Paradigm Shift Capital, a venture capital fund with a vision to partner, invest, and support tech entrepreneurs building for the global from India and San Francisco Bay Area. In his best, he served as CFO for WeWork India and played a key leadership role driving growth strategy, fundraise, and business operations of the company. Prior to work, Govind worked in Mumbai, India, first unicorn, and played a key role in the journey of growing the company globally and driving profitable operations. He has garnered several accolades, being at leadership position at Delhi, IBM, Wipro, and represent his thoughts at various finance and leadership forums. Throughout his career span, while being looked up as a trusted business advisor, he has played a key role with leadership in business strategy and finance and operations excellence. Working with people in another aspect Govind feels connected to. He has contributed to building strong, free thinking, high performing teams who take pride in their work and enjoy what they do. Namaskaram, sir. I now introduce Mr. Govind Mundhra. Let the program be continuing, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sundrajan sir. Morning Deepak, morning Venkatesh. Good to connect on a Sunday morning and talk about evolving technologies in finance. Before I jump into that, probably I'll just give a 2-minute intro about myself. I have been in the industry for almost 2 decades now, and technology is something that has always been associated with. Used to run about a couple of businesses with my father back in Calcutta, but that had no technology affluence, back in late 90s, so to say. And when the dot-com bubble burst happened, then people realized that there is something happening out in the world. That was a magnetic pull for me in terms of knowing what's happening in the technology lies. While I continued to pursue, I went on to do my professional graduation as a chartered accountant. But technology was something that was always there back in the mind. And someday one of my mentors told me, if you are so influenced by technology, then the place to be is Bangalore, because that's the Silicon Valley of India. And that is the place you would probably get to know better about emerging technologies of our country. Fast forward, joined Wipro early in the days, and spent like about 10 years in companies like Wipro, IBM, Dell. Understood what's really happening in the India services side from a technology landscape point of view, gave me enough amount of understanding on how these are going to influence our day-to-day lives, as both at a B2B, probably at an industry level, as well as a B2C at a consumer level. That understanding, coupled with what I have done in last 10 years, which has predominantly been in the startup ecosystem space, starting from InMobi, which was India's first unicorn and SoftBank's first investment in India. Tremendous amount of understanding on how advertisement technology is going to change the way media consumption happens in the country and the globe. Was very fortunate enough to sort of take the company from certain revenue to a very high flying growing company. And during that phase, I continued to invest in my own time in understanding more about technology levers across many other industries, and how you can actually influence people around that. All in all, after that, and being CFO at WeWork, I have come to a point where now I have moved to that paradigm shift that Venkatesh sir was talking about. So I have started by the name of the fund is Paradigm Shift Capital. It's India's first global venture capital fund. The idea was how do you actually marry the affiliation of technology, and how do you actually propel entrepreneurship in this country to the next level? And that is what I'm going to start with. Probably some of the slides are fairly raw in that sense, but I would love to take you guys through what my understanding has been in technology field, both for finance as well as in general how things are getting impacted out there in the market. And the way we will keep probably today's session is talk about the evolving role of CFO. I think Venkatesh sir has put the landscape in terms of how the role of CFO is changing literally day to day, not even hour to hour. and how we all need to be adaptive to those changes and see what are the current landscape and the challenges that we can solve. And probably, with a better understanding on disruptive technologies from future, will be far more adaptable and far more better in a situation where we understand how businesses are getting, how businesses are getting impacted, and what role can finance actually play in terms of being that strategic partner for the business. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Awesome. And probably just keep about 10 minutes for Q&As and key takeaways that I have sort of put across. Would love to have more and more questions and make this as much as interactive as we can. Cool. So before I jump into how finance and how CFOs have been able to bring how they need to sort of evolve over time with the adoption of technology, the first question which came to my mind when I was preparing for this was, why technology? Why there is so much of conversation going on the technology aspect? What is that the finance need to adopt to? I think most of us understand that, but I just wanted to put across a chart from what I saw, probably slightly more dated, but just wanted to give more of a directional view on how things have been moving in Nasdaq, right? For example, a Nasdaq today, 50% of the value or capitalization is sort of driven by technology companies. And on the right hand side, if you were to see some of the companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, they have been the ones who have been creating value creation charts across the globe. More importantly, in pandemic as well, I mean, companies like Apple moving from $1 trillion to $2 trillion within years is something that world is taking notice of. And I think just beyond just some of these numbers, I think it is important to understand that how technology will continue to disrupt, how technology will continue to be very ever present, omnipresent in our lives, and how we are going to adopt to it or probably not adopt to it is going to determine the outcome in our own respective professions, services, etc. Right? So that is the most important takeaway. And I'll tell you why I am talking about these numbers or slides when I go through what finance contribution has been and where are the things that we can actually step up far more. Let's take a step back, right? While we obviously need to understand how technology is actually sort of having an alliance with finance function, and obviously the roles of CFOs have changed over a period of time. Let's take a step back to understand what has been the change in the roles of CFOs, right? If someone were to ask me about 10, 15, 20 years back, most of us were being looked upon from a very financial discipline, very high on control aspects, very high on governance aspects, right? And I think those things continue while we have been now being looked upon, the finance profession, CFOs, the teams have been now looked upon in terms of being a strategic partner. What is meant by strategic partner? If you think of it from a very landscape point of view, from any company, be it MSME, be it enterprise, be it even a startup today, uh, one of the very key roles that is played by finance within the companies, they are the ones who have like a 360 view of a company, similar to like what a CEO or a promoter or a founder would have in those respective organizations. So it is very important to now understand that the role of CFOs have moved from a typical day-to-day accounting or control and high governance environment to now being added with what are the things that can impact even a customer churn, or what are the things that I need to take care from a vendor perspective, or how are my working capital being looked upon, what is that my investor is looking for, and how do we remain adaptive to those changes, right? So all in all, it's just not about ensuring financial discipline and control. I think that is the backbone of finance function, but now CFOs are expected to be far more strategic driver, far more a catalyst of bringing change alongside founders and CEOs. And that is something that I am seeing from last 4 to 5 years more aggressively. And I think while we were in that journey of moving towards digital adoption, which is one of the key catalysts for driving growth across many industries, one of the key things to understand is pandemic has accelerated that growth forever, right? The days are gone where we could have afforded to be in a world where okay, we will get into digital adoption. I don't think so that is anymore the case. I think across the globe, across industries, we have clearly realized that digital adoption and adopting to technology are the only means, right? For example, look at what is happening right now. I'm able to share my screen and be able to connect with so many people in a virtual way. That is also an outcome of technology. And if this would not have been in place, we would have been struggling to even understand how do we actually move forward, right? So while it was already moving in some shape and form, I think via pandemic and the impact of pandemic that has had, in all the discussions that we have been having from last 15 months, there is a very clear understanding that digital adoption, technology adoption has become like a key layer for all conversation. Not only are the CFOs or CTOs responsible for that, now there are boardroom conversations happening with the CEOs and the founders on what are the progress being made across each of these and how are we actually looking up to that. So that's the ever evolving role of ever evolving change in the role of CFOs that we are seeing more pertinently these days than what was spoken about, say, about 2 to 5 years back. Let's sort of do a deep dive on what is meant by that, right? While it's all good to understand that there is a change in the way CFOs now need to look at their own roles and profiles and need to work closely with CEOs and actually work with investors. Typically, if you were to look at the way I have always gone across and built finance functions or built teams of very high performance, there are like three large pillars that I have always looked upon, and I have always seen many other CFOs in the industry pretty much take a similar approach. One is very high control, risk, and governance, and which is what something was always there, very inherent with finance, will continue to remain so. And there are more and more technological advancements happening for us to actually be more productive on those aspects. So that's like one layer, and that layer has to be the backbone, the very foundational aspect of of any finance organization per se. So that is not going anywhere. The regulation, control, and the focus on those aspects will always remain. There is another layer that I look at, which is more on performance and effectiveness, which typically be determined by the name of financial planning and analysis function or even a business partnering function, right? Typically, the role of those functions would be to look into how the business is performing, right? It's no more a case of okay, monthly I have been able to publish MIS and my job is done. That is no more where the CFOs are actually limiting themselves. The conversation has now gone into okay, the MIS is prepared, the books, month closing, quarter closing has been done. Let's look into MIS. The MIS has been published, but what are those key insights that we can drive from that MIS? What are those key insights that can be driven through those reporting, analytics, etc.? So the data then comes very much into the play. Gone are the days when we used to actually have data as part of the a back burner. Data has now pretty much become the centrifugal force for any decision making across the entire leadership team or even within the finance function. So that's pretty much the second layer or the second pillar, which is obviously very dependent on how effectively the role has been played from a governance and control point of view, and how effectively the monthly financials or quarterly financials has been published, because that is the backbone that always need to be the right input point for any data analytics to actually work out. And the third piece is more around third pillar is more around investor relations and capital raising, right? So there are like these three large pillars from a finance perspective. Large pillars from a finance perspective that an internal CFO has to moderate with, and there are teams and structures being built around that. So the conversation will always be around very high governance on high governance and risk controls mechanisms, but then there always need to be looking forward to how we are able to strategically add more and more business performance in the conversations with the board or with external investors, how that is sort of becoming a 360 viewpoint for any finance function or finance folks or CFOs to be aware, right? And that's what pretty much I wanted to summarize in one form, that most of the leading organizations now are looking at this triangle of effectiveness, efficiency, and control. And that is where it is very, very important to strike a control, strike a balance, and understand where you are actually, do more like a in-depth diagnostic approach to understand, are you very, very high on effectiveness? Are you very high on control? Are you very high on efficiency? I used to do something called health check of financials way back in my career, where we used to keep both, obviously looking at profit and loss is something that we all love, but looking at effectiveness of balance sheet is supremely important for most of the finance folks and the CFOs. And that is supremely important to understand where are sort of effectiveness or where are the leverages lying in the balance sheet, where is the arbitrage possible, what are the risks that could actually arise as a result of that. And hence it is very important to see how we remain effective in driving those effectiveness, how we actually sort of promote a very, very strong governance on control as well. Because a lot of times I have been hearing these days the conversations on our, we are just more, looking forward to data, the integrity of data, and what data can do. But let's not forget that the control, risk, and governance environment will always be very high on any CFO's radar or any finance team's radar, and we cannot ignore that. So at all points in time, there is a need to actually maintain a very, very important balance between these three, pillars of finance function. Right. So we spoke about, how the role of CFO is sort of evolving. What are the things that have been looked into from this ever changing environment? But for one of the funny things that I've also realized, there's humans are very, very resistant to change in one form, right? At a point in time, we always look at our comfort zones. We always look at what is the daily input and daily output, and hence there is a need to sort of move out of that very, very inward ecosystem to figure out, okay, if that has been the change that we are looking forward to, what are the other changes that are coming up, and are we prepared for that or not? And if I were to put all those conversations in a nutshell, predominantly across, this is one of the things that came in a recent survey from 160 CFOs, that if they were to summarize the change of a CFO profile in last 5 years, but what has been the challenges on the ground to bring those changes to actually, effectiveness, I think I have been able to broadly summarize the challenges right now from very two different aspects. One is more towards day-to-day, I think accounting, day-to-day financial closure, while ERPs have always been in prevalence, and while we already have a lot of other accounting softwares in abundance. But I think still the issues that are on the ground from a lot of finance team members has always been spending hours and hours and hours and hours and months into reconciling data. A particular ledger does not, tie back to what accounting entries have been posted, and there have been several reconciliations being done for tax records. There have been several reconciliations being done for many other aspects of finance function, and hence that continues to be a large challenge which has not been solved completely. I think what we have done in past has been to sort of hire a lot of people to sort of perform those reconciliation jobs. I'll talk about how technology actually can make an impact there. Right now, moving on to the second aspect is, we have had multiple systems, right? In any organization, whether it is an enterprise or MSME, if you look at different functions, a human resource team will have their own system, a sales team will have their own system, a legal team probably will have their own data tracking, etc. And then there is this finance team which is supposed to put together every information available in the company to be depicted rightly from a financial or a balance sheet perspective. So from that perspective, if you think of it, there has been no, there are multiple ERPs, multiple softwares, but then where is that one point of view of getting that data right, or how are those multiple systems synchronizing in tandem, so that the output for that data or output for creating that financial report is accurate and is something that investors can take a lot of confidence from. So that has always remained very, very high on the challenge radar as well. The other aspect is more in terms of looking into future, right? Traditionally, and this is something that we have to take a lot of pinch of salt while I'm saying this. There's a pinch of salt in saying that we have always remained cloned into something very specific to our own domain, which has always been looking into past, right? The monthly closures are happening 7 days after the month has actually closed, and MIS is actually being prepared after, say, about 2 weeks to that month closure. A lot of organizations are realizing that there is a need to look at being far more proactive than reactive. How can we actually do financial closures virtually? How can we produce those reports in real time so that we are able to, so that we are able. Venkatesh sir, if you can go on mute, please. So there is a need for being far more proactive than having a reactive approach, which is what the erstwhile world used to be. And I'm not saying that it will change overnight. Those technological advancements need to be adopted, need to be understood well enough. And I think somewhere culturally as well, there is a need to incentivize the adoption of newer technologies. I think we have always been in a place where a certain software has done a job for probably a couple of days, and that has never been a need to actually even relook at whether the same work can be done in 2 hours or not. We have always remained in our comfort zones to see, okay, this is something that has been happening traditionally and that has been happening for ages and ages. I think that culture now need to move towards how we can be far more productive. How can we actually look at those technological adoptions to see where we can move forward much more faster, and be importantly aligning back to what the role of CFO is moving towards, is being far more strategic. And I think that is where the layer of technology is going to help, and we will talk about that in successive slides. So all in all, while there is a movement happening, while there is a landscape change happening, there are a lot of challenges which are still need to be addressed, and let's see how technology is sort of going to impact or improve, or even have any change per se on those aspects. uh, this is a very, very very high level macro view of some of the jargons that we get through, right? I happen to be now in venture capital industry, so my whole purview or focus has always remained to be what are the technologies of future, what are the big shifts happening across all the industries as well as in finance domain, and how we are sort of looking at the adoptions for that. And I just thought, I'll probably present this slide to give a better understanding of, technology is no more about just cloud adoption. I think cloud has been a part of movement in technology from a very, very long time. And now there are newer streams of technology that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of how they can actually impact things, and how they can actually effectively bring in a change where we can be far more productive than what we were probably 5 years back. So IoT and cloud has been the talk of the town for last 4 to 5 years. But now, if you ask me, in last 2 years, the only thing that we now talk about is AI, ML, big data, RPA, blockchain, NFTs, whatnot, right? And there is a creator economy coming up. There's influencer economy coming up. And unfortunately, we don't have way too much data for our country to present on that, because the tech ecosystem IPO or being public has just started now with Zomato's IPO, and now Paytm also looking for an IPO in India. But if you were to take a cue from what has been happening in the West, these technologies are real. It's no more jargons. Gone are the days when we used to actually sort of brush aside, knowing that, oh, probably these are jargons, and inherently as finance community we tend to not understand it directly. But if you were to put it in a layman's world, these are very, very easy things to understand. These are not rocket science in any form or shape. So it is important that we have that learning mindset, It is important that we have that change mindset. And once we have a combination of both change and learning mindset, I think then we'll be able to embrace technology far more better. We'll be able to embrace, how these things can impact our day-to-day lives as well. Obviously, it won't happen overnight. Everyone understands that, but there is a shift happening towards understanding some of these. And I think, just by getting into that gear of knowing more and more, it can severely enhance the performance, and it can help finance team being far more powerful, uh, moving on from that journey of uh, being that strategic partner, having that skin in the game of running businesses along with founders and promoters, which has now become an expectation. So now it is very much expected out of a CFO to understand how these technologies are going to impact businesses on the ground, how these would be taken up. In fact, you just probably for surprise of many, now the CFOs are now given the mandate to run this across organizations. It's no more the responsibility just shared by probably the IT team or the CTO of the company. CFOs now are pretty much in the heat and are now very much in the centrifugal force of that ecosystem, where they need to understand far more on how these things are impacting, because at the end of the day the financial preparations are based on some of these modeling or structures or tech ecosystems. And unless and until the CFO or the finance team understand how it is impacting even the reporting, or even accounting, audit, taxation, name it, right? Every facet of finance will actually get impacted as a result of these. And let's take a slightly more deep dive view. I don't want this conversation to just remain at a very high level, talk about what AI ML. So what I have done is I've taken a very layman's view of how we can understand some of these things, and how we can go slightly more deeper to know what these jargons are actually, what is meant by artificial intelligence, what is meant by machine learning, what is meant by a robotic process automation, right? So very simple example, and this is something that I saw in IBM was actually taking this smart city contract long back in 2010 2011 in the city of in one of the cities in Sweden. And the problem that was thrown by the government to these some of these tech companies out there was, we have a massive traffic problem, something that all of us go through in Bangalore as well. And how do we look up to technology to solve for these, right? So while we have heard about smart cities and obviously how technology is playing a role in that, it's important to understand at the ground level what does some of these jargons even mean. So think of it from a very Bangalore landscape point of view. We always see traffic from one side, very heavy on one side of the road at a particular peak traffic time, which is if there is a traffic moving in one direction, certain times there is not equal amount of clog on the other side, right? And that just happens to be the reverse in the evening time, when the peak traffic actually moves in the opposite direction. Imagine if we would have had computer vision experts on those street lights or the traffic lights, which could have given a very clear understanding on how is the traffic moving, right? Just a very simple understanding, no amount of expertise required, very simple understanding of here is a traffic signal where it is actually open for 120 seconds, here is the movement of traffic on that four sides of that particular traffic signal. I think if you just get that data, right, and just putting in a very layman's understanding, just that gathering all of data and understanding that over hours, days, months gives us a pattern. That pattern is nothing but machine learning. So the computer vision, which is basically fitted through a camera, that actually gives a lot of signaling into a particular data layer, which then is then overlapped with machine learning programs to make us understand how is even the traffic moving in a particular city in a certain way. And that machine learning is one aspect of technology, right? What can impact? Okay, this is something that I have been probably able to get as a data, but how do I make a change? How do I actually make it slightly more traffic free? How do I bring a change in that? that is where artificial intelligence come into picture. So for example, if the cities and if the signal is actually green from one side only for 30 seconds, and there is a huge amount of traffic pile on that side, and the signal is now then open for another side of the road for another 30 seconds, but the traffic pile is not that big, or it's not actually that huge. Imagine if a very simple change of machine learning which tells us that if we were to add 45 seconds on this side and 15 seconds on the other side, it will probably have an impact on the congestion of traffic on one side, and vice versa, absolutely the reverse in the evening when the traffic is in the opposite direction, right? So we have been able to get a lot of data for days, months, and hours, and we have been able to get a machine learning understanding on that. Apply artificial intelligence on that, that if you are able to bring a small change through these things, this is just one simple example on how traffic could be eased. And I'm not saying that, folks in Bangalore do not understand this. Obviously, a lot of understanding is there. It just takes certain time to actually get to that adoption. It's not easy to actually put computer vision experts across all the traffic signals in the city. So it's a huge exercise which needs to be undertaken, as a lot of work has already happened, a lot of work will happen. But this is just one of the examples that I wanted to share from a very day-to-day impact of our life, how machine learning and artificial intelligence can impact things for better. Let's jump on to how this can be implemented from a very finance first point of view also, right? If you look at the world today, or at least how it has been 5 years back, we were always in this world of being descriptive, right? An MIS report is just a report. It has to be understood, it has to be known very well. Yes, there is a lot of man hours being spent for preparation of that report, not taking away any effort out of that, but at the end of the day, it is just a simple report, and we still need to understand what do we make out of that report. The data is no more good enough. The impact of data is what needs to be understood at a far more granular level. So if we move from that descriptive state to probably a predictive state, right? And I've taken an example of, just looking at the electricity consumption for any company for a given month, right? So I can have one approach which says, hey, here is my electricity spent for the month. That's like my descriptive nature of stating in a report. And that used to be perfectly acceptable 5 years back. Now we are more looking into, hey, by the way, while this is what my spend is, if I were to look into certain other parameters of how that can be impacted, it could be tariff hike, it could be, if Bescom has made a change in a certain plan. It could also be, whether I'm using solar versus a normal power source supply. It could also be certain other climatic factors which can impact that, right? Seasonality impact of how we see electricity bills being slightly more lower when we are in winter season versus slightly more higher when we are actually in summer season. So can we bring that predictiveness into that? Absolutely, very simple. And then that is where probably we are right now, right? We have moved from the descriptive level to a predictive level. How can we actually move to a point where it becomes far more prescriptive? I think that is where machine learning can actually make an impact. Not only is it limited to two or three factors which I spoke about in the predictive landscape, I think if we can add like about 5 or 7 other parameters into that, how it can be compared with any other similar industries per se, how it can actually have an impact. It could give us a landmine, or a base mark of information basis which will be able to make a lot more smart decision making. So till that layer, as I said, right, on the machine learning side, it is just a data layer with a machine learning program which gives us far better understanding versus just being able to put hours and hours into it. But if we were to move into the AI layer of that, it could pretty much move into what we see with Google's and Alexa's of the world today. Alexa today is nothing but a conversational artificial intelligence program, nothing else. It's just being able to interact with a human in a given command format, and that is done through years and years of machine learning that it has been able to adopt and understand different nuances built on that. So from moving, so why I wanted to actually take all of you through this particular aspect of how things can be impacted in finance or data analytics world, or for teams in business finance or teams in business partnering, teams in financial planning and analysis, folks who have been actually looking at it from a day-to-day perspective, there is a lot of change that can be brought in. In fact, a lot of audit modules are now getting established on these principles. That instead of going through vouching, auditing, etc., how can we move into a world of knowing that these numbers can be verifiable, and hence the sort of range of error is probably limited, but the range of errors could be extraordinarily different in certain other aspects of the same financials, and hence the focus need to be far more on that rather than just sort of looking at validating certain inputs and outputs. So that has now become, I've spoken to probably all the big fours and all the other audit organizations across the globe. There is a lot more work happening even on the audit intelligence layer, just through ML and AI applications and nothing else. So that's what I wanted to take you through on the data analytics world. Similar work is happening probably at 100x the level at which these data analytics are being worked upon in the control, risk, and governance framework. And that brings me to how we can look at process automations as a part of our day-to-day life in finance, right? And this is a snapshot that I've picked up from McKinsey's report, where they actually had a survey with probably more than 100 CFOs across the globe, and they wanted to understand how much of repetitiveness work is conducted by finance organizations across the globe, how much of that repetitive part can actually be automated, how much of that is still dependent on certain human forces to manage. And if you go through this chart very simply, and I can share this later, is if you look at general accounting operations, right? Very large amount of human resource workforce in finance function is actually part of that general accounting operation, can be fully automated, right? And at least 77% is what the survey comes up with. And there are multiple softwares that are now looking at this opportunity, because it's a landmine of market. Market data is huge for these opportunities. A company like UiPath or Automation Anywhere has been able to actually build those nodes of looking at each and every aspect of going as deep into processing a journal entry, going as deep into working capital cycles, going deeper into revenue contracts, reading those revenue contracts, and giving us a revenue assurance report. So I think the world is moving from where we were tuned to be looking up to our teams and certain elements and talent of human resources to produce those things. Technology probably can add to it, can actually bring a lot more efficiency and productivity by just sort of automating. One of the key things that I didn't speak in my previous slide was about GPT-3. GPT-3 is nothing but an advancement of how AI can actually move into a completely automated AI, where all I need to do is probably just prepare throw a revenue contract to a certain software, and that software can actually give me all nuances of that, prepare a revenue assurance report for me, and give me an understanding of what are the key aspects that I need to consider for revenue accounting, right? So there are various facets. Obviously, on the audit side, there is more automation that is yet to happen. Still, the chart shows that we are somewhat there to automate it, but I see that there are more scopes coming up in those fields as well. So that's how I am looking at the convergence of technology, how it is impacting day-to-day financials, how is it impacting day-to-day accounting, day-to-day risk governance, day-to-day data analytics, so on and so forth. And that solves for predominantly the two pillars that I spoke about, which is the controllership layer of governance, audit, accounting, risk, tax, etc. That's one large backbone pillar, and the pillar of financial planning analysis, understanding data engines, understanding how data can actually be predicted far ahead of time. And hence CFOs and finance functions can be far more in a proactive mode rather than in the reactive mode. It could always be a case of, hey, I don't have to wait till my financial closure to happen to understand what kind of what kind of electricity expense has been there. It could be far more impactful to understand that, hey, this is the electricity expense that I believe would be there. What are the other things that we need to make a change in? Pricing, I think, has been one area where there has been unbelievable amount of tech adoption that has happened. Most of the industries, talk about airlines, hotels, businesses which are more dependent on occupancies, right? The pricing engine is supremely important to understand, and because they move on how low or high occupancy the asset has, and based on that, dynamic pricing has now become a reality, right? We can actually, there are actually startups which are now being able to offer dynamic pricing to even bus operators. But, remember all these state highway bus operators where the seat, the cost of every seat is the same. I have got a particular proposal where the cost of every seat could be disruptive, right? Which used to be the case in airline industries. How dynamic pricing has been actually evolving now that I'm seeing in various other industries as well. So that's the power landscape of what technology can do and how it can impact your business on day-to-day basis. And as I have been saying, right, these are things which have been happening on the ground from a fairly long time. And I have just put across some few real world use cases across. No, I mean, there are obviously far many more examples, but I just picked up, few cases where we have been able to see this happening very, very fast. I spoke about automation anywhere. I spoke about dynamic pricing. There are obviously chatbots available, which gives you an interactive understanding of how things are actually happening on the ground. There are obviously a lot of plugin reports which are now coming along with the BI tools, which are able to get that data interpretation very, very well. So all in all, a lot of work happening, a lot of work will continue to happen and evolve. I think the most important thing that I want to summarize and then take probably a few questions would be, what are the things that we need to keep as a takeaway, right? What are the things that we need to bring in a change whereby we can look at how these layers or how data can actually, have a very beautiful convergence with technology and how those technologies can be adopted. One of the very key things that I've been talking about from a fairly long time now is the adoption. I think everything on data and technology, etc., can be understood. There is, as I said before, there's no rocket science involved. We just need to apply a very simple layman mind of logic, applied logic, and then see how we can actually embrace those technologies to understand the impact of them. It's not important to understand the coding. It's not important to understand the machine layer program. A lot of chartered accountants, young chartered accountants reach out to me, sir, do we need to actually have a formal education in machine learning programs? My idea is probably not. I mean, you just need to understand the impact of it rather than just probably willing to be an engineer who understands the coding program. If you do, if you have the curiosity, very well. But if that is not a mandate to understand some of these newer technologies. But I think the most important thing that I have been speaking more of lately is the skills. The skill need to be improved to understand some of these. The competency has to actually be improving to embrace the change. There has to be an understanding that, the role of finance is ever evolving and will continue to evolve, and hence the career path which used to be there 20 years back will no more be the career paths for today. So there is that constant innovation, constant understanding which need to be there. And again, I mean, my conversations with most of the organizations has always been promote a culture. Promote a culture where you are not only limited to finance, by the way, this is across all the functions in the company, where there has to be a incentivization for a learning mindset, a curative mindset, very curious driven mindset, where people can, or young talent can look up to what is that we can pick up from here, what is that, how do we apply them, even if there are certain early mistakes that someone goes through. I think that should not be penalized in that sense. There is obviously going to be the learning period that all of us need to travel. We have done that in past, we are doing that right now. All of us need to sort of allow that within our organizations as well, and more we are able to go in with that mindset of bringing that cultural change to adopt it. I think we'll be far better situation, in a far better place. Now I know that there are various other cons also that folks have spoken about: data security, data protocols, privacy, etc. I think a lot of work is happening. I don't think so we have an answer to everything in terms of is it completely sacrosanct? Is it completely 100% audit proof in that sense? I think a lot of work is happening on all those counts. There is obviously that debate going on public cloud, private cloud adoption. There is debate going on data security protocols. WhatsApp became a rage 3 months back when the encryption or their security policies were to undergo a change, and so many people moved on. So imagine just a very simple data security encryption can have humongous impact on your business. If your entire user base moves from one particular app to another app, that's disruption of business at the ground level. So it's important to understand these things. It's important to embrace it. It's important to understand how these can even eventually impact each and every aspect of the business. With that, I think I probably covered most of it. I know that some of these things are slightly more futuristic in approach. I did not speak anything about blockchain. I think that can actually take another one full entire session. A lot of work happening on decentralized finance, a lot of work happening on how blockchain can actually improve the authenticity layer across various industries. So huge amount of work happening both in US, India, China on blockchain technologies as well. But that's a larger discussion, and I wanted to save today's time for more on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how finance can embrace that.
Thank you, sir. So just to share my screens.
Yeah. If there are any questions, happy to take that. We
have 3 questions.
Yeah.
From
I think that is for Venkatesh, sir. The first question. You want to take that, or should I take it?
Govind, you give an answer. So if there is something I can add, definitely I will pitch in. But I think your answers will be interesting.
Sure. I mean, I've been talking about this in my entire session. Like, embracing technology is supremely important to bring any change. And one of the things that I said, and that picked up a lot of viral 3 months back, was I was talking about how each of us individually and each of the organizations, the promoters, the owners, the founders need to be thinking about technology first. We have to be tech first, and if we are not, then we'll be obsolete in 5 years. It's as simple as that. Obviously, not counting on what are the pros and cons of doing those, but I think world have realized that was going back to my first slide on how a lot of technology companies have been value accretive in our lives, day-to-day lives as well as businesses' lives, and hence there is that clear understanding that tech is the only way to go forward. And don't over-index on it. Just probably look at how your businesses can be impacted at a given point in time. There's no need to actually just run 5 years forward and probably try and see the impact of that today. It's important to take that change, embrace that change, and see that. So there are hurdles. There will always be hurdles in bringing change. That is what we spoke about, and hence that is something that is a cultural shift that has to happen. Venkatesh, sir, you want to give a flavor on the VCFO side for the same aspect?
Yeah. See, this is the standard challenge that most of the time when you get into an MSME or a small setup, you face, especially in MSME. Typically, startups will be a bit tech savvy, so I don't see as a major issue. But even in the tech savvy companies, people invested money in their core technology. The core app will be there, but when we talk about some amount of automation, don't do it in Tally. Let's move to a slightly advanced Zoho or QuickBooks, and related reconciliation and related this one. We should actually do an automation. There will be a bit of a discussion around it. In somewhere there will be a mental blocks, and somewhere there will be more. They would want to be more convinced on the ROI of the investment. I think the trick of the VCFO service is that we should be able to articulate the benefit that will come out of it. And many times the benefit is not simply a cost reduction. It is an effort reduction, and also enabling a larger process, enabling actually a growth. I think that's the picture that if you are able to paint, where you say when you do these two, three things, you are actually preparing for the next phase of the growth. And how exactly that growth will be enabled by this, how the lesser number of mistakes or a more updated information using these tools are going to help, and you should be able to convince them. Because I would presume that the reason you have been called is to actually to enable growth or enable. It's not really to just really book close the books and actually manage only the compliances. If you have been asked for the right reason, you should be able to convince. There can be specific cases where people are so embedded in the old way of thinking. Any tool and technology, there can be a lot of pushback. So those are the cases where you have to see whether your advice is really is the right one in that place or not. Those calls need to be taken, but that is only after you have been able to talk their language at the same time, make them convince them. That's exactly the role of a VCF.
Thank you, sir. I'll probably take question number 7. Suggestions for any online MIS dashboard. I think there have been plenty. There have been plenty from both BI tool point of view, where the adoption can, where the information can sync directly from a ERP system that the organization may have, plug in into a BI tool, which gives you a beautiful online dashboard. In fact, so to say that now even the MIS reports are not circulated to all the leaders in the organization. The dashboard sort of takes care of it. People have questions, they actually throw questions on why a certain change has happened and how the data is impacted there. In fact, a lot of work on the automation or the RPA side is also now happening on MISs, where if there is a repetitive task which actually can be completely automated, RPAs or the bots are able to take care of that in that sense. So plenty of that. I can probably send a few on an email sometime later. Any tips on how to be continuously updated on these raging topics? Welcome to the world of venture capital. No, I mean, jokes aside, this has to be far more curiosity driven to start with. A lot of times it could also be dependent on how your organization is looking at technology advancements and tools and adoptions, but always be around to bring more and more, always be up there to see what are the changes that are happening. Bunch of softwares, bunch of startups which have done very, very well in similar ways, where they have embraced blockchain as a technology for, as I was saying, trust and authenticity layers. There has been conversation happening for one of the startups that I actually was evaluating 2 weeks back was on completely reconciling the GST software, completely automating the whole GST differences across various data streams. So very interesting work happening. I would believe, just have a curious mindset, read more and more on what is the new technologies happening, because I spoke about RPA or blockchain or AI ML today. 5 years down the line, I'm going to talk about very different topics, because these would probably then become norm for the day. So it's important to just have a learning and a curious mindset. Sorry, sir, you wanted to say something?
I think you are absolutely bang on the. So 2 points actually. One, there is a saying, there is only one way to solve a problem, which is solve the problem. So basically, when you say how do you update, the question is do you have updation in a technical, updation in IT as a standard way of working for you and your team? If it is so, how? I would want to go back to that point. If it is going to be a very ad hoc approach in terms of learning, it is not going to work. We have been into the strategic CFO service for last 1.5 years. Despite being in the industry for 30 years, I must tell every day I am learning. So, but at the same time, for the team, there is always a structure by which we actually bring it. We identify what needs to be learned, and then we actually go to the subject matter experts. Many people believe Google uncle is going to solve all problems. It doesn't. You need to figure out, as I said, what is the core of what you want to do, and build really deep expertise and really ability to learn everything that happens in that subject. The way you would have learned the taxation, or the way you would have updated the accounting standards, you would not have asked question. Where to go, whom to ask. Similarly, IT. Similarly, about everything that he talked about, ML, AI, each of them are going to be in the same same way. However, you have to go to the subject matter expert. You have to have that connect. You should be able to figure out who will be able to help you in some way where you are even less than the pass marks on their topic. There is no point in trying to become an expert there. Then there is a right network partner who can actually help you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it has to come from within. It has to come from a fact that I don't want to go through this repetitive task for day, months, years, etc. There has to be that inquisitive approach to figure out what is that I have been doing for a certain task in 2 hours. How can I do it in 20 minutes? How can I do it in 2 minutes? That constant inquisitiveness and that curiosity will lead to what are the things that are happening on the ground and whom to approach, as Venkatesh sir said rightly, that need of approach has to be put across very rightly. Moving on to next question, do you suggest some automation goals in common? Is there any guidance to pick up the right software? Very important question, very rightly asked. Very simple answer, one size does not fit all. As simple as that. What may work for a certain organization, if a certain software works for a certain organization, it is not necessary that it will work for any other. So the most important thing, and I actually probably missed updating that slide, was do a complete deep diagnostic of your own organization, the processes, health financial checks, understand where the strengths are as a team, as a function, as an organization, understand what weak points or the areas that need to be improved upon. Do that diagnostic approach to come up with what could be right software. Right? Don't try and see that a certain organization adopted a certain ERP or a certain RPA tool or a certain thing. That is something that we can take, all our lives will get improved. That is not how it will work. That one size fit does not fit all, and hence a very important way is to look at a deep diagnostic approach and then look at what could work. There are ample. I can probably say this with conviction that once you reach out to what the core problem is or what that core issue is, there are plenty of softwares available to address that. That is not a challenge. The challenge is do not try to apply X on a solution which is looking for Y. So that is important to know, and hence that requires a very deep understanding of your own data hierarchy, data models, connect with your IT teams, connect with your CTO teams to understand how these flows can be done in a much better way. What metrics are used while developing the cost benefit analysis for automating finance functions? I think Venkatesh sir can take that.
See, first of all, I would say automating finance function is a matter of conviction. Okay, so you don't get a cost benefit analysis because you are not going to cut down what you are doing. The benefits are not going to come in terms of people cost, and the minute you go on to that path of trying to convince a client, you are on a slippery slope. The way to understand automation of finance function is that is the organization looking at a path ahead in terms of new products, new growth areas, new geographies? What are the complexities you are building in? And today's team, today's tools, are they really meeting? It's a more of a question of strategy rather than a cost to benefit analysis. You can always figure out a way of actually putting a value around all this, but I would say the answer is more on the strategic path rather than on the financial evaluation in terms of return on capital.
Yeah, and there have been certain times when organizations have been budget constrained, etc. So what my idea or suggestion would be to pick up few things rather than just going for the entire approach. Maybe probably pick up few aspects, pick up few fields which can actually be looked upon, work on that. There is always that need to prove as well, right? There is a point to prove that these things are good for future, and probably cost benefit analysis is not required. But if there is a constraint on from a budgeting perspective, frugality point of view, good to sort of break it down into several pieces and that adopt that. Awesome. I think I've gone overboard by 6 minutes. Sorry, Deepak, on that. But over to you, Deepak. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Govind.
I hope you're able to hear my voice. Am I
Yes, sir.
audible?
Yes, sir. Screen
Thank
is
you,
visible.
Govind. And just hold on, I'm just opening my screen. I just adjusting the screen to right level.
Yeah,
Just
Mr.
give me a minute.
Sundarajan already introduced Mr. Deepak Gupta at the initial part of the session itself. So we are not getting into one more round of this one here. Deepak, you may start with a couple of lines about yourself for the benefit of those who joined a little later.
Sure. Just adjusting my screen so that I can see the panelists as well as. Okay, hi, very warm good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Venkat and Govind. It was quite insightful session by both of you. So I believe one, we learned that we have done the paradigm shift and become more matured and knowledgeable CFO, and now we understand the technology from the client side and from the CA side. Now we are ready to become a CFO. Let's make some money and at the same time wealth, maximize the wealth for our client. So what everyone says, should we start? Sure. So before I start, I will give you a brief introduction about myself. I have close to 17 years of experience in finance and got my CA long back in 2005 and started my career in EY. So spent my first 10 years of my career, including internship in EY and Deloitte, worked across segment, industry, and geography, and got a good understanding of the basics of consulting and finance as such. And when working, I worked in the large corporates as well as the small and medium sector enterprises across geography. And what I understood that the challenges which are faced by small and medium sector enterprises, 80% of the challenges are same across the globe. There are 20% challenges which are geography specific because of certain regulations, but definitely with the right advice and right consultation, any of the SMA founders can overcome it. After spending a few years in Big Four, I moved to industry. I did my MBA from Indian School of Business. After that, I did a transition to industry where I worked as a commercial head in one of the wildline company, Act Fibernet, for close to 3 years. After that, I worked in one of the startup, Moving Sync Technology, where I helped them in raising the fund, at the same time insourcing their finance function from outsourced consultants to in-house full-fledged finance team. So there, after working as a CFO for close to 3 years, it was a good learning in a way that how the startup environment operates, what are the key challenges from inside the company, I understood, and at the same time, that gave me a lot of confidence to start Extrawise. That was me, Venkat, and one of our partner, Ivy. We started towards the late 2019, back end of 2019. So in Extrawise, we are providing strategic finance advisory to startup and growing stage companies. Specifically, we are focusing on MSME companies. And we all know it's last month only, the MSME day gone by. And there was an event and we understood some of the challenges which was faced by MSME industry, where the president of PNA industry area, Bangalore, the gentleman came and appraised us of the current situation. The Karnataka Minister of Industry also came in the session, and he also given us the emphasis and importance of MSME industry and what role government is playing in that. So this is largely about me and what I do, and I'm taking the session on role of a CFO in fundraise, mergers, and acquisitions. Largely, this is a topic which can cover entire weekend. I can keep on going days after days covering this topic, but I try to restrict myself to only the situations that arises for MSME companies and some of the startup companies, so that it will be more relevant. And specifically, I will cover the cases where how CA who is on the path of becoming a CFO, what role he can play, and at the same time, what are the skill sets he needs, what are the pitfalls, what are the key outlines he need to look into whenever he is on the journey of CFO, and when he enter into a situation where he need to help in fundraise or mergers and acquisitions, what are the best practices, what are the things he need to take care. Now, some of the facts. If we see in the previous year, 2020, the total fundraise in India was close to $11.4 billion. And this came against 924 deals, quite high number. Again, in terms of acquisitions and mergers, it comes to $80.4 billion. Total 1,200 plus deals happened. Whenever I talk to various MSME founders and startups, they struggle for funding close to entire 2020, and in 2021, unfortunately, after COVID too, the coffers of the MSME companies are drying up. They are struggling for cash. And whenever I discuss these numbers, there is a question comes that where is the money? Where is the green color? Or in India, we say, where is the pink color of money? We can't see it. Like in M&A, thanks to Geo, which covers more than around 40% of this $80.4 billion. So where is the money for MSME and startups? Definitely it is there. But for that, there are certain things which MSMEs and startup companies need to do their fundamentals right and go to the right investors in order to raise fund. Or for MSMEs, I will say most of the times they are the target for some larger companies or some of their peers. So if they will not make their fundamental rights, they will not take the right advice, they will not able to consummate the transactions, be it fundraise or it is a merger or acquisition. So there is a money on the table. It's only thing is that people need to make their act right and approach to right investors through the right consultants so that they can consummate the transaction. On the fundraise side, just small statistics which I have taken, which you can see that the numbers of deals are increasing, though in terms of amount, the value decreased slightly, but definitely $11.5 billion is a large number of deals which flown to India. So what are the key focus whenever anyone is going for any of the transaction, be it merger or a fundraise? The first thing, especially it is applicable for startups, they need to see what product they're selling and what is their right realistic valuation. If the ask is for unreasonable valuation, definitely they will not able to get the right takers. Same is the case, it is negotiated well with the investors. The investors who are investing in a company, they should know the right value in which investors are investing. The fundraise is adequate to achieve the stated objective. A startup need to understand, SMEs need to understand that what's the objective. It is for the product development, whether they are raising the fund for geographical expansion, or it is for creating a new product or improvisation of existing product, or setting up a new manufacturing setup, or scaling up the current turnover they are achieving. It needs to be clearly determined, and that will give the confidence to the founders so that they can communicate it well to the investors as well as their investment bankers. Another problem which I see in many of the SME sector and as well as in the startups, it's very tough time to understand that what's the level of dilution they should go for. I've seen the companies which diluted more than 60% of their holding by the time they reach Series A or Series B level. After that, when they need for geographical expansion or for this further scaling up, if they need capital, founders don't have much holding. I've seen some of the companies which are really struggling because the new investors are not coming up and investing money. First, definitely COVID is one of the reason, but another reason is that once the new investor comes, the existing founder's stake will be less than 20%. So the new investors are not getting confidence that the founders will be involved enough for the significant years to take the companies to the next level. So these are quite important questions, which definitely founders and SME founders of small and medium scale industries and promoters of startups need to be aware of. What should be the valuation? What should be the dilution? And what's their right disposal of money once they receive it? And it used for the level in which they will further increase the valuation to certain multiples so that investors are enthused enough, motivated enough to invest. A very important question comes to the startups. Especially, I will again go back to MSMEs. When I talk to the promoters of MSME in, say, Pune industry area, or maybe in Hyderabad or Delhi or Mumbai, what I've seen that only one source which comes to the promoter's mind is bank. That bank is the only way that they will get the debt funding. They are bootstrapped. Bootstrapped is nothing but just founders or promoters are bringing the money from their own saving. That is bootstrapping. Second, at times some of the founders already explored FF&F in fundraise. Question comes in your mind is, what is FF&F? It stands for friends, families, and fools. Whenever the companies are just at ideation stage, definitely either my family will give me money, some of my friends who really go by my words, who have a faith and confidence on me, they will give me money, or maybe some fools, so-called fools, but definitely they are smart enough to understand that they are betting on a jockey, not on a horse. So it's a FNF, family and friends round, which gives them money. Another thing which many of the SMEs and startups already evaluating, because of late in last 5 years, 5 to 8 years, we can see the smart ecosystem developing in India, which is covered by various angel investors, various chapters across the cities, and some new age VCs coming in, like Govind came up with this paradigm shift capital VC. So there are many of the angel investors who came and put in small amount of money at ideation stage. When idea is just about to start, at that stage, they give in some amount, maybe it ranges from say 50 lakh to 2 CR or 3 CR in INR. Next stage is venture capital. Whenever the company is at an early stage, or it's at a stage where it is developing the product. So many of the venture capital companies which comes and help out the companies, they invest directly in equity and make sure and give the right guidance to the management team to develop the product, and at the same time take it to the market. After that, there are private equity companies which invest the companies in the growth stage, or when they are about to be on the maturity stage, so that there are adequate product diversification, there are geographical expansion, and companies meet their larger growth goals. After that, there is also an option of IPO. I'm not sure how many MSMEs think about SME IPO. So it is started by BSE, Bombay Stock Exchange, now it is Mumbai Stock Exchange, way back in 2012. In 2013, NSE, also National Stock Exchange, also started with its SME Emerge IPO Index. So you'll be surprised to know that there are 350 plus companies who are already came with an IPO in BSE, and out of that, close to 80 plus companies moved from SME IPO index to the mainstream IPO, mainstream of Bombay Stock Exchange listing. So it's quite interesting that with I will not say minimal effort, but a limited effort, with the right fundamentals and products in place, SMEs can look for IPO listing as a very good option, because many of the times I see that out of many of the SMEs, they have the right product, they have the right customer set, but at the same time, their fundamentals, if I see their books, I see it is in a somehow manageable state. So if they develop their processes and systems right, they take the right advice, SME IPO is a very good platform. They can look for raising some of the fund. And the last but not least is through mergers and acquisitions, where SMEs can be takeover target by the large companies, and founders may hold a small stake, so that they can also run the company, and at the same time take their small baby, whatever they make it, walking toddlers, they can see the adulthood of their child, their company. So there are multiple options at the same time. These are the equity options, something I covered, right? For the fundraise, there are definitely a lot of other options in the debt side. There are venture debt companies. Innoven is there. There are Trifactor. There are a few of the companies which also invest in which also gives debt to the company, which are in quasi-equity nature, where a debt is attached with certain warrants or certain convertible options. So those are also one of the options. Along with that, there are options available in terms of various government funds and SIDBI and NABARD. Those companies also provide a right funding to the eligible startups and SME companies. So that's what, when I started this session, I said that there are avenues available. Only thing is that SMEs and startups need to make their act right and move to right consultants where they can apply for the right value, right fundraise. On the merger side, definitely we see a slightly just hold on. On merger side also we see the lower number of transactions, but in terms of deal size, as I said, thanks to Reliance, the deal size increased to 80 billion from 74 billion in the previous year. Now, why people go for a merger? The merger, the key outcome which is expected by the acquirer and equity is that there should be some synergy in the transaction. For example, you have seen that a taxi for sure bought by another company in India, Ola. So there are multiple examples you will see that where existing companies is acquired by a new company or old company, wherein there is a potential synergy, whereas there is definitely the combined entity will yield more better results and better shareholder wealth in the long run. So the role of CFO or the key finance person is to ensure that they estimate what the synergy lying in the transaction, quantify it properly. This synergy can lie in terms of their operation, in terms of their geographical spread. This synergy may lie in their customer diversification. So combinedly, they need to estimate that what would be the right quantification, monitor that during and after the consummation of mergers and acquisition, that this synergy is monitored and attained over a period of time. At the same time, during the negotiation, the CFO or the senior finance person in the SME or startup companies need to ensure that this this particular synergy is quantified and communicated, and at the same time shared on a fair basis between acquirer and equity, between the target company and the acquirer. Now, there are certain key values which CFO brings on the table. Whenever we discuss about the M&A or any of the transactions, the role of CFO is enormous. And here there is definitely certain strategy discussions which CFO lead. He show his right leadership in making sure to lead the transactions and drive the relationships with the different stakeholders. But at the same time, whatever he did in the past, the traditional finance side will not lose any of the significance, because whatever numbers he's sharing, largely it is driven from what kind of books he maintained, because that are the information that is captured at source. Any of the specialty finance, or like say subject matter expertise, CFO need to involve them, like say direct tax, indirect tax experts, some of the labor law experts, or HR and secretarial experts. They need to bring in their guidance. So overall, the strategy and leadership part covers 46% of the effort. Traditional part covers a significant 41% of the effort. And in the transaction, all the specialty finance covers 13% of the effort. This is on the basis of a survey done by PwC in 2019. Now, how a CFO will provide the right value in the entire transaction. CFO is a person, a senior finance person, whether it is in-source or outsourced, whether it's a virtual CFO or a full-time CFO. They are the people who knows that what's the right insights and what's the story behind the numbers. If any numbers are communicated to the investment bankers, they can quantify it properly and at the same time present in a way that make sure that investment banker understand the right picture, right story behind the numbers. He will determine what are the optimal terms of transactions, at least what he can offer to the investors. At the same time, whatever terms investors are giving, whether it is follow-on right or tag-along right, or it is certain restrictions or information rights, he will decide that to what extent it is possible for the company to accept any of the restrictions. I've seen a company, sorry for using some of the words, like a company in which their shareholder list goes, it's like a laundry list. There are close to 100 to 150 investors. The terms which company accepted for providing the informations, like there are requirements where a company need to provide monthly MIS results along with all the data to 150 investors. Now, at any given point of time, 10 to 15% investor comes with some of the questions, and it was a Herculean task for the accounting team and for the finance team to respond to all the questions. So these are just restrictive clauses, but clauses which just slow down the slow down the work of the entire organization in a way that on one side, finance team could have worked in some of the more productive work, but now they are just responding to some of the questions of investors. So in those cases, the right guidance was given to the company is to profile the investor list in such a way that the larger investor will get more frequent informations and updates. With a lesser shareholding percent, a shareholder will get a lesser information, but at a lower frequency, and it was well accepted by the investors as well. Now, another point which comes and it lies on CFO's head is taking objective call after evaluating the internal and external factor, whether a company need to go for the transaction. Especially, it is more pertinent for any of the mergers and acquisitions. Any of the M&A should not go on the whims and fancies, or maybe on the on some of the confirmation bias on the board side or the management side. It's a job of a CFO to give the right picture to say that whether a company should go ahead with the transactions or not. It's more on the objective ground CFO need to evaluate. Just I want to give you a very broad level deal value calculation, where you can see that say on the basis of valuation, there are certain value derived for the company, say it is $30 million. Now, a CFO, if a CFO is buying any company, or maybe a CFO is on the side, I'm giving an example where CFO is buying another company. So for the target during the due diligence, CFO may identify that there are certain compliance misses. For example, you can see that it's known to most of the CAs that how there is a difference between GSTR 2A and whatever amount as a GSTR input credit available in the books. There can be a difference. There can be a certain notices in the income tax portal, and those notices are not met. Those notices are not responded to, and there are some confirmed liability on the company given by income tax department. Those are the compliance misses or reconciliation misses. So there is certain values that needs to be deducted from the enterprise value. Same is the case with labor law misses or some intellectual property claims. Many a times companies apply for intellectual property, and the claims are made by other companies for the infringement of intellectual property. And again, those claims are not accounted for, or maybe some legal guidance are not properly taken. In that case, there may be a potential big claim hit the company. There can be some vendor claim. There can be a chance that a company purchased, there can be a case that a company sold the product and not deposited the GST on time. So there can be a vendor's claim in that respect. There can be a sufficiently large customer dispute. And here it is very important for a CFO to see that what are the customer dispute and how a CFO knows about the customer dispute in the target company. Definitely, CFO or the finance professional, or as a CA, you are providing services to the acquirer, you need to go through the customer's agreement and see the restrictive clauses and see that whether the restrictive clauses are applicable and any infringements are there in the maintenance of agreement. There can be a new business risk you discover at the time of DD. All those things needs to be taken care of. It needs to be quantified. What are the risks? The risk needs to be quantified, and all those additional potential claims needs to be deducted from the deal value. Then we arrive at the final deal value at which the investor will invest in the company or acquirer will buy the target company. Now, as a CFO of a target company, as a virtual CFO of a target company, say for an MSME, what's your role? Your role is, before companies are considered to be bought by some other company, some other acquirer, your job to ensure to give the right picture, give the transparent mirror to the promoter that where they are standing. In case there are some compliance misses, some labor law misses, some infringement on intellectual property, there can be certain restrictive clauses on the customer agreement. You need to identify and discuss and resolve or dissolve it on time. And at the same time, it is always known that known devil is better than unknown one. If there are some misses, just it's better to be transparent to your acquirer, your potential purchaser, so that the potential purchaser will also have a confidence that whatever is there, the target company is transparent in disclosing all the facts. That makes the life of your client much easy in sailing through the transaction. Now, in all the actions, whatever happens in the transactions, among all the senior leaderships of the company, CFO is the person which is on the hem, which is in the middle of all the actions. They are the people who are managing the existing angel investors and institutional investors. Especially in case of say SMEs, they are the people who are managing various debt fund providers as well. They know what are the debt covenants. In case future fundraise needs to be made, they know what are the things need to be done. On the basis of the company's position, they will identify, locate the right investors or hire the right investment banker who help them in locating the right investors. They lead or they support on the due diligence process, whether the due diligence auditor is hired by the investor, or it is they will decide that they need to do the vendor-led due diligence. Vendor-led due diligence is nothing but when a company is, and themselves want to go through a due diligence process so that the upcoming transaction, whether it is fundraise or mergers or acquisitions, it will be an easier affair. CFOs are the people who hire the company secretary, legal solicitor. They manage the treasury fund. And at the same time, they are the people who manage the founders and the board. They are the people who ask the right questions to the CMOs, CTOs, CEOs, and all the other CXOs, so that they are knowledgeable enough to go with the transaction and take the go ahead from the board, give the right transparent picture to the board and help them in taking the decision. CFOs are the first people who come to know that what's the projected runway for the company. Question is, what's the projected runway? And I think this is a question I believe that 75% of the MSMEs are facing. If any of you call your client, if you call 10 clients, you will see that there are 8 clients who are checking their bank balance, if not on a daily basis, at least once in 2 days. Runway is nothing but amount of money available with you divided by the number of divided by your expenses. So you can see that for how long you will go with your current cash. As per one of the research report, it says that close to 40 to 50% of the MSMEs are on the brink of closing their shops because of pandemic. Just think of a situation. Currently, there are 6.8 crore MSMEs in India. So there are 3 crore MSMEs which are on the brink of collapse if the runway is not managed properly. If they will not able to manage their cash properly, manage their operation properly, find out alternative way of reaching out to their potential customers. So it's the CFO who gives this guidance on how to do what at different levels. In case the fundraise is required and there is a runway of 3 months, 4 months, they can identify the right source from where the funds can be raised. There can be an inflow-outflow mismatch. It can be a temporary phenomena, it can be a permanent phenomena. In case of permanent phenomena, it's a bigger problem. And that's what definitely, CFO need to see. And as an external VCFO, virtual CFO or strategic CFO, you need to guide the founders. The unit profitability. It's extremely important whether it's selling a single product, whether a company is having the unit profitability. Your sell price should exceed the purchase price. And this is important information you want to inform to your investor so that they will have a more confidence in investing in the company. What are the potential synergies in case of M&A? Bringing more depth into the entire funding, CFO need to know from where it's the CFO who will decide that what would be the right source of fund, what would be the right requirement in terms of a fundraise. So if a company is needing $1 million and they will ask for $5 million, not sure how many investors will be ready, and definitely their responses will not be very convincing. Another question comes, which definitely as a CFO or a virtual CFO or as a finance advisor, you need to know that whether the company is ready for fundraise. I covered it in depth in the previous slides where I mentioned that there are compliance regulatory requirements, there are accounting books needs to be managed, MIS needs to be closed, and it is community and business plan needs to be prepared and valuation needs to be arrived at before a company need to go for a fundraise. Because even if because any of the investor will ask largely 3 questions if anyone comes for fundraise: what the company do, what's the company do, and what are its profitability, what's the valuation, third, what's the dilution. Same questions for M&A. Companies should know that where they are, and it's the CA who bring this understanding, and I will say enlightenment to the founders that where they are standing, are they ready for fundraise or M&A. So being a custodian for all the informations and database, whether it is financials, MIS, business projections, whatever inputs are going to the valuations, contracts, all the memorandum of understandings, any of the strategic partnerships. So CFO are the hem of all the information, and they will always ask the right question to the in-house stakeholders, that is it the right time or what would be the quantum. They will come with a suggestion. And at the same time, if there are certain personal aberration on the leadership side, they need to dissolve it with the objective answers. At the same time, bringing the right objective numbers in front of the CEO and the board. For the mergers and acquisitions, definitely CFO role is very important in identifying or helping identification of the potential target. Whatever the targets, if company is buying, or in case a company is getting acquired, CFO need to understand whether the right value is extracted from the transaction. I will say a fair value, not the right value. Now, after the transaction, if the target company is continuing, the management is continuing, they need to see that whether the synergies are evaluated, monitored, and achieved over a period. Just I've given a very brief snapshot of what would be the fundraise process. Some of the part I already covered it before. So in the I just divided the entire process into 3 parts: pre-fundraise, during fundraise, and post-fundraise. So in the pre-fundraise, as I deliberated it in the earlier slides, CFOs or the external virtual CFO finance professionals need to identify what's the need of funding, where they will dispose, and come with their adequate valuation along with the business plan. This is an important step where definitely a finance professional is going on in the self-introspection mode of the company and the founders to understand what founder want to do in next say 5 year, 10 year down the line, and at the same time what are the strategic steps and decisions he's planning to take. That will all go in the business plan. Because when any of the CEO and the CFO sits with the investors, those are the pertinent questions that will come again and again. During fundraise, it starts with the process when investors agree to invest and provide the term sheet. What is term sheet? Term sheets are the high level restrictions, the amount and the conditions on which investors will invest in the company. So CFO or external finance consultant definitely need to see that the term sheet should not have a restrictive condition that will impugn the future growth of the company, or it should not create certain scenarios that will create a conflict with the existing investors or the future investors. Now, in this phase only the due diligence starts, and due diligence, it's a very important process wherein the investors will come to know more about the company, and the role of CFO is extremely important. And whatever the issues identified in the due diligence, all the issues needs to be remediated. I've given you the example wherein various issues identified. If it is a potential risk, then definitely a CFO need to take the hit in the valuation. If it is not remediated, definitely a hit need to be taken in the valuation. Now, if I compare it with the pre-fundraise phase, and in case the CA provide the right advice to the founders, to the promoters, and if any issue is identified, they clear it before, the situation will be very much different. Maybe like a small payout at that time or small remediation at that time will not bring the hit in the enterprise valuation. So definitely a promoter and the founders of the startups and SMEs, they should not go on penny per wise pound foolish approach. They need to take the right advice, and maybe if required, go for the due diligence before a fundraise or before any of the acquisition related transactions they are entering into. Then towards the fag end of the fundraise process, definitely the investment banker on the behest of the investor or the acquirer comes with a condition precedent. Condition precedents may comes with a list of conditions that needs to be, or actions needs to be taken by the company, and after that only the money will hit the account. After all those compliance of the condition precedent and accepting and signing all the shareholders and share purchase agreement and share subscription agreement, the post fundraise comes wherein the transactions are closed, and CFO need to monitor that all the secretarial parts are taken care of. In case there are certain conditions subsequent, those needs to be identified and taken care of. I mean to say, if some regulatory filings are there, that needs to be done. Share issuance needs to be done. And at the same time, if there are certain targets, revenue targets or operational targets that are met, and the final communication will go to the new investors and existing investors. Some of the roles which pivotal roles which will be played, which normally a CFO and senior finance person plays, is at a pre-fundraise level. Definitely a CA need to ensure that the internal housekeeping, or I will say that internal bookkeeping, I will say it's more of a hygiene of the books, is well taken care of. All the previous round key documents are filed, and it is ready for the review. Like one of the major thing I've seen, some of the failed fundraise processes I've seen is that the company's books are not maintained properly, and some of the VCs pull out from the fundraise process, and it's a significant cost for the company as well as for the VCs. For the VCs, because they have investors' money, they have a limited partners' money, and they will not able to invest in the company. And especially for the company, it's a lose-lose deal, because some of the basic things which they have not taken care of on time, and now they will delay. They are forced to postpone their growth targets. And especially in the COVID situation, if the company don't have a runway, it's a suicidal. Any of the failed fundraise attempt will be a suicidal. And some of the cases where I've seen that where some of the transactions may be delayed, not postponed or not cancelled, is say there are certain prior fundraise event happened, and there are certain condition subsequent, and those are not met. Like one of the larger example I've seen, it's largely in case of say prior investors transactions are not closed properly. It could be your share transfer form, as simple as SH4 form is not signed by the investor and the company. There could be a case that It's a foreign investor and FCGPR is not filed or unique transaction number not generated, or some transactions happen with the foreign investor and FCTRS is not filed or not approved by authorized dealer. In all these cases, these are quite simple work, but definitely it become important and urgent work and delay the entire fundraise process. And we all know time value of money. Every day passing by add on to the cost to the company. Making sure that it brings another point that external investor need to see that the cap table is clean. They need to have the right investment banker, ensure that the right business plan is prepared, valuation is arrived at, and a right information is going to the potential investor. On the valuation side, there are a bunch of valuation methodology available, but largely, most of the investors, investors use either discounted cash flow method or venture capital method. I'm not going into the detail of all the valuation methodology. It's again a subject in itself. But largely, we do heard about the discounted cash flow method. But I will just spend half a minute to 1 minute on the other methods like Burker's method. It says that it gives a certain objective quantification of value to criterias like feasibility of the product, availability of the market, soundness of the management board. For all of them, it gives certain value and then the value is arrived at. In case of venture capital method, say on early stage companies, a future valuation is derived at on the basis of the growth potential and revenue potential of the company. Certain multiples are given, say 4x or 5x, and then the valuation is arrived at for the company, and it is discounted at a significant higher value to the current date. And that's the valuation of the company. And say a company arrived at a valuation of $40 million, and the external investor want to put in a $10 million. So your pre-money valuation is $40 million, post-money valuation will be $10 million, and there will be a 20% dilution. It is 10 divided by 50. That's a 20% dilution in the company. During fundraise, I covered it in detail earlier, where CFOs or as a VCFO, you need to lead the due diligence process, identify the issues, and make sure that it is remediated, take care of the condition precedent, and at the same time, keep the investors informed. On the closure, again, the role of a CA who is becoming a CFO or a CFO of the company or a virtual CFO of a SME company need to ensure that transactions are closed properly. If it is not closed, it will bite in future, where your future fundraise will get severely impacted. So it may as a senior finance professional, whether in-house or outsourced, you need to ensure that the documents are executed properly, shares are issued, regulatory and secretarial filings are taken care of, funds are utilized properly, and investors are communicated, and at the same time, buy-in needs to be taken from the investors as and when required. A quick round of discussion on M&A process. In the interest of time, I will try to cover it in 5 minutes. Most of the processes are largely same. Like in the pre-merger situation, a CFO or as an external consultant, you need to ensure that you understand the objective of merger. Unless you understand the objective of merger, definitely you will not be able to provide the right value. For that, you definitely need to dig deeper into the thought process and mind of the founder and promoter. Whether a promoter want to sell his company, want to be acquired by other big company, be it whatever the case, you need to understand the reason. Then accordingly finding the right fit. It should not go on the whims and fancies. It should not be the ego satisfaction right for the board. Critically examine the right fit and the end result. It goes a long way for the consultant and the CFO to see that what would be the end result and accordingly take the steps, accordingly identify the right fit for the company, be it a buyer or a seller of the company. Make sure that term sheets, if you are a seller or a buyer, you need to understand that what are the terms for you, what are the valuation, dilution, and at the same time, if you are selling, what are the terms, what are the post-holding, holding of promoters, and at the same time, what about the current employees of the company? To what extent you may need to reduce the manpower? Maybe what are the integrations, at what level, which integration will take place? Valuation, a very important thing. If you don't know the valuation, I doubt that you will be able to do justice to your client. So you need to have a conviction on and have a clear classified parameters on which you are judging the valuation. You know about the hits and misses by the company, so that you give a proper adjustment to your valuation, your enterprise valuation. During transaction, the due diligence process, definitely as a CFO or virtual CFO, you need to support the promoters. Your client will look at you to make sure to sail through the due diligence process and remediation of all the issues. And at the same time, in the due diligence process, in my experience, even the smaller of the problem is at times there are due diligence auditors who make a mountain of a molehill. So as a learned person, as a professional, it's your job to ensure that that you quantify the impact and inform to the right stakeholders objectively, so that the enterprise valuation is fairly estimated. Another important part, whether it's for the acquirer or a target, the post-merger integration, and whatever the risk coming in the transaction that needs to be identified, monitored, and mitigated. Similar thing what I discussed before on the pre-merger acquisition. Few of the recall things I will mention here is that to find the right fitment, do the pre-due diligence, and at the same time ensure that you are arriving at the right valuation. One of the most important thing is to ensure that you are hiring the right consultants. As a virtual CFO or as an in-house CFO, you will not be able to do everything. For some of the areas, like any of the subject matter expertise, you need to hire the right consultants. You need to go to the right valuation team, investment banker, and at the same time, any of the subject matter expert to identify any of the misses or hits, or at the same time, what are the adjustments that may be required. During transaction process, help in due diligence process, clearly define the goals, objective, and the final synergy that will be achieved, so that the potential investor, acquirer, and the existing shareholders, they knows about it. In case there are some minority investors and there are certain concerns, all the issues can be resolved through a right communication, and make sure that there are win-win negotiation. And this can only happen when you know what are the data points, and you are aware of the history and the market landscape. As we all say that a person only knows that whether his socks are torn or not, right? So similarly, I will suggest that make sure that you know in and out of the company when you go ahead with any of the fundraise or merger or acquisition transaction. Post-merger cultural alignment, a very important thing. Many of the mergers fails because the post-merger cultural alignment don't happens. I don't want to go on all the examples, but definitely when you will see any of the post-mergers, you will see bunch of issues which are at times highlighted in some of the media newspaper as well. Synergy attainment, a role of CFO is extremely important to ensure that whatever synergy he identified before, it is monitored, action plan is there, and it is attained over a period of time. Monitoring the performance with respect to the projections. Closure of completion of compliance work, very important. Like as I said, that if compliance works are not done on time, definitely it will bite in future. Any of the risk coming out of the transaction. So one of the example I will give you, around 8 to 10 years back, there was a company which was in an investment space. It bought a venture debt company, and in this entire process, the key people who are the sales and business side, they were not taken in. In the entire process of the entire acquisition, after this consummation of transaction, the company sold out that investment arm in 4 years down the line. Why? Because it was a loss-making proposition. The key managements were not taken in, or they were not buying in the entire transaction process, and they left the organization before the consummation of transaction. So there was a risk involved, and the acquirer not assess the risk properly. Now, there is another example which I can give is in one of the logistics company, we have seen that the acquisition happened and the target company, it's a small last mile delivery company. And in the entire transaction, there was certain issues identified in the due diligence process. And the acquirer identified that whatever the risks are there, the promoter's payout is deferred for 2 years until those risks are mitigated, or whatever the revenue or promoters claim that a company is earning, it is not realized. Realized, it doesn't mean that raising of the invoice, it's about receiving the money from the debtors. Until it is done, the amount will, some partial amount will not be paid to the promoters. So this is one of the risk mitigation approach, which definitely the CFO of the acquirer company has taken. Suppose it has not been taken on time and not a part of the deal structure, and whatever the revenue claimed by the target, and it is not realized, it's a loss-making deal for the acquirer. It will destroy the shareholder value. So in a way, what are the final takeaways? First, a CFO, it's extremely important, whether it's any of the transactions, fundraise, merger, or acquisition. You need to ensure that he maintains a continuous channel of communication with the existing investors. There's a term that manage your board. A board cannot be managed on the day of the board or on the board meeting. So it's a role of a CFO to ensure that all the board members are aligned to the transactions or to the requirements of the company. As a senior person, as a virtual CFO, or as a consultant to the promoters or a MSME company, it's your job to ensure that the promoters are doing things right. They are managing their board in the right way. Otherwise, there can be a chance that promoters are struggling for the funding. They want to consummate certain transactions, but the communications are not happening with the board at right time. And whenever your value will increase, enhance in the eyes of your client, wherever you give the right guidance and your guidance are implemented in the right direction. Whatever the assumptions you are taking for the valuation, make sure you are making the realistic assumptions. Always ensure that you compare the other companies at a similar level and then come up with the realistic assumptions, taking into account your internal and external factors. As an investor, I've seen some of the companies coming up with the assumptions that their offline sales will increase by say 5x to 8x in 1 year down the line. There is no visibility in terms of COVID situation that the offline sale will increase, again depending upon the nature of the product. So there are if you are making an assumption, say for the distribution channel, you need to ensure you take into account the ground reality, because that's where you're right, as your appropriate assumptions and business modeling will come into question, and you come up with the right assumptions to make sure you arrive at the appropriate valuation of the company. Be extremely thoughtful of taking the advisors. I always believe that taking the right advisors always go a long way. Don't go penny wise, pound foolish. At the same time, as a CA, I know that as a CA, we know of various areas as a curriculum of a CA syllabus, thanks to CA Institute and proactiveness of our members. We go through all the different courses given by CA Institute at the same time through the contemporary news and the courses, and we equip ourselves with the knowledge. But are we expert of all the things? Answer is no. So whenever you need help, have an abundance approach, involve experts. Prepare and strive for win-win negotiation. Try to push your clients to go for a win-win negotiation. Learn from either your past mistakes and not past mistakes, or mistakes committed by other people. Don't always learn mistakes at a current level, right? So I will suggest that don't make the mistake. To try to see that other people what mistakes they have done, committed in the fundraise process. You will get adequate examples. Monitor the progress and engage with the stakeholders, be it in-house or outsourced, or it may be a potential investor. Make sure you are keeping the communication line open. And communication always go a long way. And whenever there's a deadlock situations, I've seen in multiple situations in my earlier stint as an employee, and now as a consultant to various MSME companies. The growth stalls whenever there are least communication. There are companies, especially it goes for SME sector. I've seen that many of the head of the functions are not meeting even once in a month. So just think of it as at a cumulative level, what kind of impact you will create if you are not meeting at least a month. And as an external advisor, it is some of the role you can play is push your promoters, push your client to take the consensus on any of the major areas. For example, this fundraise, not about fundraise or merger acquisition, at least you can say that how is the preparedness as a team you are when you will take the decision. There will be a buy-in from the important stakeholders inside the company. So with this note, I'm largely cover the session. I'm more than happy to take questions. Okay. Question is, please share a detailed procedure on the CFO role from finalizing investors to receive investment funds to the organization. It's a kind of it's a book in itself. Thanks for asking this question, but to be very honest, it's a complete book in itself, right? Because first is I covered it partially in different slides. When you are saying procedure, I believe that you want to understand step by step what are the process, any of the start CFO need to follow. The first step definitely starts and finding out at the level of growth or the level of stage you are, from which source you need to raise the funding. Then definitely you need to ensure that you are ready for the fundraise. Ready from the fundraise, what I mean is that your books are in shape. You know what's your business plan for next 5 years. Your regulatory filings and compliance filings are up to date. Then you are ready for fundraise. Then go for the valuation with the independent valuer so that you have an idea that what would be the valuation you can pitch for. Prepare your business deck and pitch deck and hire an investment banker. After that, there are more further steps during the fundraise and after the fundraise, which I covered in my session as well, that needs to be taken care of. So if there are more particular question, I will able to answer. Otherwise, in this one, I suggest you connect with me offline. More than happy to explain you on each of the individual steps. Second question is, there's another question. I think who is sharing the screen. In computation of final deal value, should we consider to add the cost of integration issues like significant time in consolidating procedures and workforce? You need to calculate the cost of integration as well. If it is cost of integration could be, I can give you an example of say a mining company. And there are certain companies, there can be a significant cost of integration. For example, a mining company is acquired by say a metal company, right? So there are certain integration issues in terms of the manpower, and at the same time there are some towards the tail end when the many of the mining site is closed. There are certain costs that may need to be incurred. There can be some potential cost that needs to be considered. So I'm just incorporating it as a part of entire deal value in calculation of EV, definitely enterprise value. Definitely those things also needs to be considered. So answer to your second question is yes, we need to consider the cost of integrations. And at times there are situations wherein The enterprise values are adjusted if there are significant issues in integration, and there are significant delays as well in the integration process because of some internal issues of the target company.
Those were the questions. That's over to you, sir.
Come to the end of. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, take.
Mr. Panaraj, I just want to cover. I will just take 2 more minutes here. So, Mr. Panaraj, this entire CA to CFO transformation seminar, it is a 4-day seminar. So
Yes.
we are concluding today the 2nd day of this seminar.
Yeah, I know.
In the interest of the participants, I just want to add on there are 2 more days of seminar on 23rd and 24th. Yes. So there are more exciting topics which are coming up. For example, contract negotiation, communication with investor management. Then there's a topic on MSME and panel discussion. So definitely we look forward to see more and more participants on 23rd and 24th.
Yes. At the beginning itself, I requested.
Have already gone out from SIRC side.
Yeah. At the beginning, I requested Venkatesh Bhat sir also to appraise this.
You're not audible, Venkat.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why Deepak actually added at the end. So we started off on the topic straight away. This has been covered. And also, there is a study circle which is being virtually conducted every Saturday evening. There are already 30 to 40 CAs and virtual CFOs who are part of that group. And those who want to actually connect to this group can take our numbers and connect to us. We can actually add you to the same group. And every Saturday evening, 1 hour of a discussion of different topics relevant to virtual CFOs are being conducted there. So it may definitely help you to actually to take your virtual CFO practice to next level.
To be very honest, whenever I see this virtual CFO space, the way market is opening up to this approach, I'm sure there are a lot of things can be done. It is many of the CAs are doing it, and there are enough and more opportunities in this space.
Sir, we are done, sir. Mr. Panaraj, sir.
Yes, sir. With this, we'll come to the end of day 2 of the 4 days session. 4 days, what's called, I can say, refresher course on CA to CFO. At the beginning itself, captioning was not rightly done. So because of that, some technical problems. Each time registration is enabled. So you have to register for next 2 days also on 23rd and 24th. I thank each one of the presenters from the bottom of my heart, because this is one of the real what's called paradigm shift from traditional practice to CFO. That is the real takeaway home message for today. And also a CFO to IT system by Mr. Govind Mundhra also was a very great initiative and input to the members. And the lifeblood of any organization, funds and fundraising and the related roles of CFO was taken by Deepak Gupta ji. It is very, very happy to see so many CFOs, so many speakers in this area to shift one set of people from one segment to another segment, that is from practice segment to CFO segment. And of late we have been seeing most of the organizations are headed by chartered accountants, because the days of our days, like chartered accountants being not good communicators, is gone now. So you are also good communicators, and the younger lot definitely will have greater roles to play, greater opportunities to head the organizations, and this role of CFO will give much better what's called image to the institute itself and membership itself in the long run, because we will be the business leaders in the days to come. And with corporatization, corporate style of entities, company style of entities being more encouraged by the governments with tax SOPs and other SOPs, the smaller entities survival is not that easy. So even MSME entities have to grow big and have to manage themselves professionally, where your role is very, very vital. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank all the three of you for your presentation today. And we wish to be part of this program in the next 2 days also on 23rd and 24th. All the delegates, please register yourself on 23rd and 24th also to see that there are, as rightly pointed out by Dilip ji, Deepak ji, that there are much more good speakers to come. So please make use of it and take the professionalism to the newer heights by being CFOs, either physically or virtually. So this is a full-time course and a new area of what's called the practice or the employment itself. So I request you all to register yourself. But Shalva, I request you to send this invite to all the members who registered on the day one also.
Yes, we have noted it, sir. So we'll be sharing it to all.
Both day one, day two, both 16th and 18th, all the delegates, you see that this updates of 23rd and 24th are sent. So that I also will write one line. It's a continuing program of CA to CFO's program, the session 3, session 4, like that.
Yes.
Or day 3, day 4, like that. If you give a caption, that would definitely help the people to get registered. So
sure.
Thank you very much. Special thanks because you are sparing your Sundays here, and also the participants. We are here to serve you anytime, anywhere. But only thing is, you should be ready to take our services. And as long as people like Venkatesh Bhat and the other two speakers are ready to sacrifice themselves, share their knowledge because of their passion to the alma mater of the ICAI. Thank you all. And have a good day. We'll meet up again on 23rd. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.